In the heart of 1960s London, Bertram's Hotel hides a deadly secret behind its elegant façade. When Miss Jane Marple checks in, she uncovers a web of crime, stolen bonds, a daring train robbery, and a missing clergyman. A glamorous mastermind, Bess Sedgwick manipulates her own daughter Elvira to seize a fortune. But Marple's sharp eye unravels their plot. As fog cloaks the city, secrets spill, and justice closes in. Will Marple stop the syndicate before it's too late? Dive into a gripping tale of deception and deduction. Chapter 1. Arrival at Bertram's. The train from St. Mary Mead pulled into Paddington Station with a weary huff, and Miss Jane Marple, clutching her modest suitcase, stepped onto the platform. A gift from her niece Raymond had banished the worst of her rheumatism, and with it came the rare chance to revisit London's Bertram's Hotel, a place etched in her memory from girlhood visits. The city's clamour jarred her senses, but the promise of Bertram's timeless elegance steadied her. A porter, crisp in his uniform, whisked her luggage away, and a taxi bore her through bustling streets to the hotel's discreet entrance on a quiet square. The foyer enveloped her like a warm embrace. Polished oak panelling gleamed under soft, chandelier light, and the air carried the faint scent of lavender polish. A vast Persian rug muffled her steps, and behind the mahogany reception desk, a clerk with a deferential smile greeted her. "Miss Marple, welcome back," he said as, though 40 years had not passed since her last stay, she signed the register, her neat handwriting a contrast to the florid signatures above, and was ushered to a room overlooking the gardens. The chamber was a marvel of Edwardian comfort. Chintz curtains, a four-poster bed, and a silver tray with a teapot awaiting her. Yet, as she unpacked her sensible woolens, Miss Marple's mind was not on nostalgia. Something in the hotel's perfection pricked her instincts, like a dropped stitch in a flawless sweater. She descended to the lounge for tea, her black lace mittens and brooch giving her the air of a harmless spinster. The room buzzed with genteel activity. Elderly dowagers sipped Darjeeling, their pearls catching the light, while a few younger guests, tourists perhaps, marvelled at the scones and clotted cream. Miss Marple settled into a plush armchair, her knitting bag at her side, and observed. At a corner table, a young woman, no older than 20, fidgeted with her gloves. Her auburn hair was stylishly pinned, but her eyes darted nervously toward an older man beside her, a clergyman by his collar. He was absorbed in a notebook, muttering about train schedules and conferences. Miss Marple's lips twitched. The girl's unease was palpable, and the clergyman's oblivion oddly deliberate. A waiter, moving with the grace of a dancer, delivered her tea. She thanked him, noting his flawless manners and the slight tremor in his hand as he set down the cup. Across the room, a woman entered, drawing every eye. She was tall, her blonde hair swept into a chignon, her scarlet dress bold yet tasteful. Whispers followed her. "That's Lady Sedgwick." Miss Marple's ears pricked. Bess Sedgwick, the scandalous aristocrat, whose marriages and misadventures filled gossip columns. She strode to the reception desk, her voice low but commanding, and the clerk's deference bordered on fear. Miss Marple sipped her tea, her mind cataloguing details. Bess's glance toward the nervous girl, the clergyman's sudden fumble with his pen, the waiter's retreat to a shadowed corner. the lounge's clock chimed 5, and Miss Marple gathered her knitting. She had planned to write to her niece, but the hotel's atmosphere demanded her attention. As she rose, she caught the young woman, Elvira Blake she'd overheard, slip a folded paper into her handbag, her face pale. The clergyman, Canon Pennyfather, stood abruptly, announcing to no one in particular that he must prepare for Lucerne. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. Lucerne was a long way off, and the canon's distracted air suggested he might not reach it. She made her way to the lift, her step slow but purposeful. Bertram's hotel, with its polished surfaces and impeccable staff, was too perfect, like a stage set before the curtain rose. And Miss Marple, who had seen many a drama unfold in St. Mary Mead, knew the first act had already begun. Chapter 2. The canon's disappearance. The morning sun filtered through Bertram's heavy drapes, casting a golden glow over the breakfast room, where Miss Jane Marple sat with her toast and marmalade. The hotel's routine hummed along. Waiters glided with trays, guests murmured over newspapers, and the scent of fresh coffee mingled with starched linen. Yet a subtle tension hung in the air, like a note held too long in a quiet melody. Miss Marple, her knitting folded neatly beside her, sensed it at once. The head porter, usually a model of composure, fumbled a guest's key, and the manager, Mr. Humphreys, lingered by the reception desk, his smile strained. The cause became clear when a maid, flustered, whispered to a colleague about Canon Pennyfather. The clergyman, last seen bustling off to catch a train for his Lucerne conference, had not returned. His bed remained untouched, his suitcase unopened. Miss Marple, buttering her toast, recalled his distracted air in the lounge yesterday, his mutterings about schedules, his notebook clutched like a talisman. She also remembered Elvira Blake, the young woman at his side, whose nervous glances had seemed less filial than fearful. The canon's absence, she mused, was no mere oversight. By midday, the hotel's discreet calm gave way to official inquiry. Chief Inspector Davy, a broad-shouldered man with a deceptively mild manner, arrived, his nickname Father belying his sharp gaze. He conferred with Mr. Humphreys in a corner of the lounge, their voices low but urgent. Miss Marple, settled in her usual armchair with her needles clicking, caught fragments. Insists he returned last night. Porter saw him. No record of departure. The manager's hands twisted a pen, and Davy's eyes swept the room, pausing briefly on Miss Marple. She met his glance with a placid nod, her mind already turning over possibilities. Davy summoned Elvira Blake for questioning. The girl appeared in a tailored coat, her auburn hair pinned tightly, but her composure faltered as she sat across from the inspector. Miss Marple, unnoticed in her corner, watched Elvira's fingers pluck at her sleeve. "I saw him off at the station," she said, her voice thin. "He was catching the evening train to Dover for the ferry. He seemed perfectly fine." Davy pressed gently. Had the canon seemed agitated? Had he mentioned any meetings? Elvira shook her head, but her eyes flickered toward her handbag, where Miss Marple had seen her tuck a letter the day before. The inspector, noting her unease, dismissed her with a kind word, but his jaw tightened as she left. Miss Marple's needles paused as she considered Elvira's story. The girl's anxiety suggested more than concern for a missing guardian. And the hotel's claim, that the canon had returned briefly rang false. Why would a man bound for Lucerne come back to Bertram's only to vanish again? She recalled a case in St. Mary Mead where a grocer's wife had disappeared to cover an illicit affair. But the canon, with his vague piety and ink-stained fingers, seemed an unlikely candidate for such intrigue. No, this was something else, something tied to the hotel's polished façade. As evening fell, Miss Marple lingered in the lounge, her tea cooling untouched. A porter, polishing a brass railing, muttered to another about extra duties and Lady Sedgwick's instructions. The name jolted her. Bess Sedgwick, the striking woman who had commanded the room yesterday, was a figure of fascination and suspicion. Miss Marple had overheard a maid mention Bess's late-night visitors, always cloaked in discretion. Could she be linked to the canon's disappearance? The thought settled in Miss Marple's mind like a seed in fertile soil. She rose, her movements slow to avoid attention, and approached the reception desk, feigning a query about her bill. Mr. Humphreys, distracted, assured her all was in order, but his eyes darted to a ledger half hidden beneath a blotter. Miss Marple's glance caught a column of names, some marked with cryptic symbols. She thanked him sweetly and returned to her chair, her heart quickening. Bertram's hotel, with its impeccable service and loyal staff, was hiding something. And Canon Pennyfather, she feared, had stumbled into its shadows. Chapter 3. The Train Robbery. The morning papers arrived at Bertram's hotel with their usual punctuality, delivered by a porter whose starched collar gleamed as brightly as the silver tray he carried. Miss Jane Marple, seated in the breakfast room with a modest plate of poached eggs, unfolded the Times and scanned its headlines. Her eyes, sharp behind her spectacles, paused on a bold print. Daring mail train robbery. Masked gang escapes with fortune. The article detailed a meticulously planned heist. A midnight express, bound for London with a consignment of bonds and cash, had been halted in a desolate stretch of countryside. Masked men, armed and silent, had overpowered the guards, vanishing into the night with their loot. The police, the report concluded, were baffled, though a stolen car, abandoned near a village called Witchwood, offered a slender clue. Miss Marple sipped her tea, her mind already weaving threads. Witchwood, she recalled, was not far from London, a mere hour's drive from Bertram's. The robbery's precision, its almost theatrical audacity, suggested more than common thieves. She glanced around the breakfast room, where guests murmured over their kippers and toast. The air held a faint unease, as though the hotel's cocoon of gentility had been pierced by the outside world's chaos. A dowager at a nearby table clucked about the state of the country, while a young man in a pinstriped suit read the news with a frown. Miss Marple's thoughts returned to Canon Pennyfather's disappearance, now 2 days old. Could the robbery and the canon's absence be linked? In her experience, coincidences were rarely innocent. She folded the paper and rose, her black lace mittens tucked neatly into her handbag. The lounge, with its plush armchairs and crackling fire, beckoned as a place to think. As she settled into Churchu, her usual corner, her knitting bag at her side, Chief Inspector Davy entered, his broad frame filling the doorway. His nickname, Father, suited his reassuring presence, but Miss Marple noted the furrow in his brow. He spotted her at once and approached, lowering himself into the chair opposite with a creak of leather. "Good morning, Miss Marple," he said, his voice warm but tinged with fatigue. "I trust you've seen the papers?" "Indeed, Chief. Inspector," she replied, her tone mild. "A most shocking affair, and so close to London." Davy nodded, his eyes searching hers. He had worked with her before, in a case involving a poisoned curate, and valued her knack for seeing what others missed. "It's a bold job," he said. "Too bold for amateurs. They knew the train's route, the guard's shifts, even the locks on the mail car. Inside work, I'd wager." Miss Marple's needles clicked softly, a rhythmic counterpoint to her thoughts. "And the car found in Witchwood," she said. "Was it stolen from London?" Davy's eyebrows rose, a flicker of surprise. "You're quick, aren't you? Yes, reported missing from a street near Marylebone 2 days ago. A black saloon, nothing flashy but fast. Found burned out in a copse. No prints, no traces, except—" He hesitated, then leaned closer. A scrap of paper in the glove box, half charred, had the word Bertram's scrawled on it. Miss Marple's hand stilled, though her face remained placid. "How curious," she murmured. "And Canon Pennyfather's disappearance? Any progress there?" Davy sighed, rubbing his jaw. "Nothing solid. The porter swears he saw the Canon back here the night he left for Lucerne, but there's no sign of him. Elvira Blake sticks to her story. She saw him off at Victoria Station. I'm not convinced she's telling all she knows." He paused, glancing around the lounge. A waiter was polishing a tray, his movements too deliberate, as though eavesdropping. Davy lowered his voice. "This place, it's too perfect. Like a clock that runs too smoothly. You ever get that feeling?" Miss Marple's lips twitched, a faint smile. "Oh, yes, Chief Inspector. In St. Mary Mead we had a butcher whose shop was always spotless. Too spotless, it turned out. He was selling stolen meat out the back. Perfection can be a mask." Davy chuckled, but his eyes were grim. "I'd like your thoughts, Miss Marple. You see things I don't. Keep an eye out, will you?" "Discreetly, of course, she said, her needles resuming their dance. As Davy left, she considered the scrap of paper. Bertram's name, even half-burned, was no accident. The hotel, with its impeccable staff and loyal guests, was a hub of secrets. She thought of Bess Sedgwick, whose commanding presence had unsettled the lounge 2 days ago. The maid's gossip, late-night visitors, hushed orders, hinted at more than scandal. And Elvira Blake, with her nervous glances and hidden letter, was entangled in something beyond a missing guardian. Miss Marple decided on a walk to clear her mind. The hotel's gardens, tucked behind the building, were a haven of manicured lawns and rose beds. She strolled along a gravel path, her umbrella tapping the ground. Though the sky was clear, the air was crisp, scented with damp earth and fading blooms. Near a stone bench, she paused, ostensibly to admire a late chrysanthemum. 2 porters stood by a shed, their voices low but audible. "Lady Sedgwick's orders," one muttered, a wiry man with a scar above his brow. "Said to move the crates tonight, no questions." The other, younger, shifted uneasily. "What's in 'em? Feels heavy, like metal." "Keep your mouth shut," the first snapped. "She pays well, don't she?" Miss Marple bent closer to the chrysanthemum, her heart quickening. Crates, moved under Bess Sedgwick's direction, suggested more than hotel business. She recalled the train robbery's haul, bonds, cash, perhaps gold bars, as one paper speculated. Could Bertram's be a way station for stolen goods? The idea was bold, but not impossible. In St. Mary Mead, a seamstress had once hidden smuggled lace in her shop's attic, her demure smile fooling all but Miss Marple. She continued her walk, circling toward the hotel's rear entrance. A delivery van idled there, its driver smoking a cigarette. The van's side bore no markings, unusual for a hotel expecting linens or provisions. Miss Marple lingered by a hedge, feigning interest in a sparrow. The driver flicked his cigarette away and opened the van's rear doors, revealing stacked wooden crates, their lids nailed shut. A porter, the wiry one from the shed, emerged from the hotel, glancing around before helping unload. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. The crates were small, heavy-looking, and handled with care. Not linen, she thought, not provisions. She returned to the lounge, her mind racing. The train robbery, Canon Pennyfather's disappearance, and now Bess Sedgwick's crates formed a pattern, though its edges were blurred. She settled into her armchair, her knitting a pretext for observation. Elvira. Blake entered, her face pale, and took a seat by the window. She opened a magazine, but barely glanced at it, her fingers twisting a handkerchief. Miss Marple noted the girl's coat, expensively cut, but slightly askew, as though donned in haste. A moment later, Bess Sedgwick swept in, her scarlet scarf a vivid slash against her black dress. She paused, her eyes locking with Elvira's for a fleeting second before she moved to the reception desk. Miss Marple's needles clicked, her thoughts aligning. Bess's glance had been deliberate, not casual. Was Elvira under her sway? The girl's nervousness suggested fear, not affection. And the canon, had he seen something he shouldn't? His notebook, filled with train schedules, might have held more than conference plans. Railways, after all, were the robbery's stage. As the afternoon waned, Miss Marple sought out Chief Inspector Davy, finding him in the manager's office, poring over a ledger. Mr. Humphreys, hovering nearby, looked pinched, his usual polish fraying. Davy glanced up as Miss Marple entered, his expression brightening. "Miss Marple," he said, "something to share?" She closed the door, her voice low. "I took a walk in the gardens, Chief Inspector. 2 porters spoke of moving crates tonight, on Lady Sedgwick's orders. And there's a van at the rear entrance, unmarked, with heavy crates inside." Davy's eyes sharpened. "Crates, you say? Did you see what was in them?" "No," she admitted. But they were handled carefully, and the porter seemed reluctant. It put me in mind of a case in St. Mary Mead, where a grocer hid stolen silver in flour sacks. Davy scribbled a note. "I'll have a man watch that van. Anything else?" "Elvira Blake," Miss Marple said. "She's frightened, and I believe Lady Sedgwick is the cause. Their glances today were not those of strangers. And the canon's notebook, did it mention railways?" Davy frowned, flipping through a file. "We found it in his room, untouched. Mostly conference notes, but yes, a page of train times. London to Dover, Dover to London. Thought it was for his trip." "Perhaps," Miss Marple said, "but the robbery was on a mail train. Schedules matter to thieves as much as to travellers. Davy leaned back, his chair creaking. You're building a case, aren't you? Bertram's as the hub, Sedgwick pulling strings, the cannon caught in the gears. It's thin, but I've learned to trust your hunches. Miss Marple smiled faintly. I only observe, Chief Inspector. The hotel is too perfect, and perfection hides flaws. He nodded, dismissing her with a grateful look. Miss Marple returned to the lounge, her mind still turning. The robbery's loot, bonds, cash, gold, would need a hiding place, and Bertram's, with its loyal staff and private rooms, was ideal. Bess Sedgwick, with her charm and nerve, could orchestrate such a scheme. But why involve Elvira? And where was the cannon? As evening fell, the lounge filled with guests, their chatter a soft Miss Marple, knitting quietly, watched the room. A waiter, the same who had trembled serving her tea, approached Elvira, slipping her a note. The girl read it, her face whitening, and hurried out. Miss Marple's needles paused. The note, she suspected, was from Bess. She considered following, but hesitated. Her strength lay in watching, not chasing. Instead, she approached the reception desk, where Mr. Humphreys was sorting mail. Such a lovely hotel, she said, her voice sweet. The staff are so attentive. That young waiter, for instance, always so quick. Humphreys's smile was tight. Yes, Miss Marple, we pride ourselves on service. Of course, she said, though I did notice him passing a note to Miss Blake. A message from another guest, perhaps. The manager's pen froze, his eyes flickering. I'm sure it was nothing important, he said too quickly. Guests often exchange messages. Naturally, Miss Marple said, her tone unchanged. She thanked him and returned to her chair, her suspicions confirmed. The staff were not merely loyal, they were complicit. The waiter's note, Elvira's panic, and Bess's crates pointed to a network, with Bertram's as its heart. She thought of St. Mary Mead, where a postmistress had once funneled stolen goods through her shop, her kindly face fooling all. Bertram's was grander, but the principle was the same. A respectable front for dark deeds. The train robbery's loot, she guessed, was already here, hidden in those crates or a basement vault, and Canon Pennyfather, with his railway notes and vague manner, had blundered into the truth. As the clock struck 9, Miss Marple gathered her knitting and rose. The lounge's warmth felt stifling, its elegance a lie. She would write to her, niece tonight, but first she would watch. The crates would move soon, and with them the truth. In St. Mary Mead, she had learned that evil thrived in shadows, but a keen eye could pierce them, and Miss Marple's eyes behind her spectacles were very keen indeed. Chapter 4. Bess Sedgwick's shadow, the chandeliers of Bertram's hotel, cast a golden haze over the dining room, where Miss Jane Marple sat at a small table, her modest dinner of consommé and sole meunière arranged with the precision of a still life. The room buzzed with the clink of crystal and the murmur of cultured voices, yet Miss Marple's attention was not on her meal. Her eyes, half hidden behind her spectacles, roamed the scene, settling on the figure who dominated it, Bess Sedgwick. The woman, seated at a central table, wore an emerald gown that caught the light like a beacon. Her laughter, rich and unforced, drew admiring glances, but Miss Marple noted the calculated edge to her charm, like an actress playing to a rapt audience. Sedgwick was a name that carried weight, even in the quiet corners of St. Mary Mead. The newspapers, which Miss Marple read with a discerning eye, chronicled her life. A debutante turned adventuress, with 3 husbands, a string of scandals, and a reputation for defying convention. Now watching her hold court, Miss Marple sensed a deeper game. The train robbery, Canon Pennyfather's disappearance, and the crates in the hotel's shadows pointed to a mind both bold and meticulous. Could Bess be that mind? The thought, though audacious, took root. Miss Marple sipped her water, her mind sifting details. The previous day's discoveries, the porter's talk of Bess's orders, the unmarked van, Elvira Blake's fear, had sharpened her suspicions. The hotel's flawless surface, like a pond hiding treacherous currents, concealed something sinister. She recalled a conversation with Chief Inspector Davy that morning, when he'd shared a troubling find. A guest's signature in the hotel register, dated the night of the robbery, matched no known person. A ghost, Davy had called it, his tone grim. Miss Marple, knitting in her lounge chair, had suggested it was no ghost, but a deliberate fiction. Bertram's, she suspected, was a stage for such deceptions. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft rustle. A maid, young and nervous, approached to clear her plate. Miss Marple, ever adept at coaxing confidences, smiled warmly. "You must be run off your feet, my dear, with all these guests." The maid, whose name tag read Mary, blushed. "Oh, it's not so bad, ma'am. The hotel keeps us busy, but it's good work." "I'm sure," Miss Marple said, "though I imagine some guests are more demanding than others. Lady Sedgwick, for instance. She seems a woman who knows what she wants." Mary's hands faltered, a fork clattering against the plate. "She's particular, ma'am. Always has special requests, late-night deliveries, private meetings. We're told not to ask questions." Miss Marple's eyes twinkled, though her voice remained gentle. "How curious. And does she meet many people here? Friends, perhaps?" Mary glanced around, lowering her voice. "Not friends, exactly. Men, mostly. They come and go, always in a hurry. One was here last night, in a dark coat. Looked like he didn't want to be seen." "Thank you, Mary," Miss Marple said, patting her hand. "You've been most helpful." The maid scurried off, and Miss Marple leaned back, her mind racing. Bess's visitors, cloaked in secrecy, fit the pattern of a criminal network. The train robbery's loot, bonds, cash, perhaps gold, required intermediaries, and Bertram's, with its discreet staff, was a perfect conduit. She finished her meal and made her way to the lounge, her umbrella tapping the parquet floor. The tiers room was quieter now, with only a few guests lingering over coffee or bridge. She chose a chair near the fireplace, its warmth easing her rheumatism, and opened her knitting bag. The needles clicked, a soothing rhythm that masked her vigilance. Across the room, Bess Sedgwick entered, her emerald gown replaced by a tailored coat and scarf. She approached the reception desk, where Mr. Humphreys stood, his polished demeanour fraying under her gaze. "I need the package delivered tonight," Bess said, her voice low but commanding. "No delays." Humphreys nodded, his hands fidgeting. "With a pen?" "Of course, Lady Sedgwick. It's already arranged." Miss Marple's needles paused as she caught a glint of metal in Bess's hand. A small key, passed to Humphreys with a subtle flick. The manager pocketed it, his face impassive, but Miss Marple saw the tension in his jaw. A key, she mused, could unlock many things. A room, a safe, or a secret. In St. Mary Mead, a gardener had once used a shed key to hide stolen jewellery. His guileless smile fooling all but her. Bess, with her charisma and nerve, was a far more formidable player. As Bess left the lounge, Miss Marple's eyes followed her to the lift. The woman's stride was purposeful, her scarf trailing like a banner. Miss Marple considered trailing her but dismissed the idea. Her strength lay in observation, not pursuit. Instead, she approached the desk, feigning a query about postage. Humphreys, distracted, assured her the hotel could handle any letter. She thanked him, her glance falling on a ledger left open. A single entry caught her eye. Room 312 reserved, no occupant. Curious, she thought. An empty room in a full hotel was a luxury, or a hiding place. She returned to her chair, her mind piecing together fragments. The key, the empty room, the maid's talk of shadowy visitors, all pointed to Bess as a linchpin. But what of Elvira Blake? The girl's fear, her furtive glances at Bess, suggested a connection beyond chance. Miss Marple recalled Elvira's expensive coat, ill-fitting her nervous demeanour, and the letter she'd hidden. Was she a pawn in Bess's game, or something more? Her reverie was broken by the arrival of Chief Inspector Davy, his coat damp from a sudden rain. He spotted her and joined her by the fire, his broad frame sinking into the armchair with a sigh. "Nasty night out there," he said, warming his hands, "but I've got news. That van you saw, unmarked with crates. We traced it, registered, to a shell company, no real address, and the crates were gone by the time my men got there." Miss Marple's lips pursed. How vexing! Did the porters say anything? "Not a word," Davy said. "Loyal as guard dogs, this lot. But I found something else. A witness in Witchwood, near where the robbery car was burned. Old farmer saw a woman driving a saloon the night of the heist. Blonde, tall, in a hurry. Sound familiar?" "Bess Sedgwick," Miss Marple said softly. "She was here that night, wasn't she?" Davy nodded. "According to the register, she dined in her room, but no one saw her after 8. Plenty of time to slip out and back." Miss Marple's needles resumed their rhythm. "And the canon's notebook, any new insights?" Davy pulled a small evidence bag from his pocket, containing the canon's worn notebook. "We went through it again. Mostly conference notes, as I said, but one page stood out. A list of train times, not just for his trip. Mail trains, London to the coast. The robbery train was one of them." Miss Marple's eyes gleamed. So the canon, unwittingly or not, had information the robbers needed, and his disappearance ensured he couldn't share it. "Exactly," Davy said. "But why keep him alive if that's what they've done? Why not?" He trailed off, grimacing. Miss Marple's voice was calm but firm. "Because he's useful, Chief Inspector. Or because someone, perhaps Bess, has a conscience, however small. In St. Mary Mead, a poacher once spared a witness, because she was his cousin. Sentiment can complicate even the darkest plans." Davy leaned back, studying her. "You're painting a picture, Miss Marple. Bess as the mastermind, the hotel as her stage, the canon as a loose end. But we need proof. That key you saw, any idea what it's for?" "Not yet," she admitted, "but I suspect room 312. It's reserved yet empty. A place to hide something, perhaps. Davy scribbled a note. I'll check it, discreetly. Anything else? Elvira Blake, Miss, Marple said. She's terrified, and I believe Bess is the cause. Watch her, Chief Inspector. She's a key too, though not the metal kind. Davy rose, his expression a mix of admiration and frustration. You're a marvel, Miss Marple. I'll keep you posted. He left, his coat dripping as he vanished, into the rain. Miss Marple remained by the fire, her knitting a pretext for thought. The lounge was nearly empty now, save for a waiter polishing glasses at the bar. She watched him, noting his quick glances toward the reception desk, where Humphreys had retreated. The staff, she realized, were not just complicit, they were afraid. Bess's shadow loomed over them all, a presence as tangible as the chandeliers. Glow. She decided on a bold move. Rising, she approached the bar, her smile disarming. Such a lovely hotel, she said to the waiter, though I imagine it's hard to keep up with guests like Lady Sedgwick. Always so busy, isn't she? The waiter, a young man with a faint scar on his cheek, stiffened. She's a valued guest, ma'am. Of course, Miss Marple said. I saw her give Mr. Humphreys a key earlier. For a special delivery, perhaps? The waiter's eyes flickered, his cloth pausing on a glass. I wouldn't know, ma'am. I just serve drinks. He turned away, but Miss Marple saw the sweat on his brow. She returned to her chair, her heart quickening. The waiter's fear confirmed her hunch. The key was no trifle. She thought of room 312, its emptiness a puzzle. In St. Mary Mead, an empty barn had once hidden a stolen car. Its owner, none the wiser. Bertram's was grander, but the principle held vacant spaces invited secrets. As the clock struck 10, Miss Marple gathered her knitting and made her way to the lift. The corridor was hushed, its carpet swallowing her steps. She paused by room 312, its door unremarkable save for a faint scratch near the lock. No sound came from within, but she sensed a presence like a held breath. She moved on, her mind alight with possibilities. Bess Sedgwick, with her glamour and guile, was no ordinary criminal. The train robbery, the cannon's absence, the crates, the key, all bore her mark. But Elvira Blake remained the enigma. Was she victim, accomplice, or both? In her room, Miss Marple sat by the window, the city's lights a distant glow. She opened her knitting bag, but left the needles untouched, her thoughts too urgent for distraction. Bertram's hotel, with its polished surfaces and loyal staff, was a fortress of deception. Bess Sedgwick, its queen, ruled with an iron will, but every fortress had a flaw, and Miss Marple, who had unmasked liars in St. Mary Mead, knew how to find it. She would watch, listen, and wait. The truth, like a dropped stitch, would reveal itself in time. Chapter 5. Elvira's Secret. The morning light crept through the heavy curtains of Bertram's hotel, painting the lounge in soft hues of amber and rose. Miss Jane Marple, seated in her customary armchair by the window, sipped her tea with deliberate calm, her knitting bag resting like a faithful companion at her side. The room was a tableau of genteel routine. A retired colonel rustled his newspaper. A pair of spinster sisters debated the merits of scones, and a young couple whispered over a guidebook. Yet, beneath the surface, Miss Marple sensed a current of unease, as if the hotel's polished veneer were a mirror about to crack. Her thoughts were fixed on Elvira Blake, the young woman whose nervous glances and hurried movements had marked her as a figure of intrigue. Elvira had been absent from breakfast, a fact Miss Marple noted with interest. The girl's behaviour, her furtive handling of a letter, her pale face after receiving a note from a waiter, her fleeting exchange of looks with Bess Sedgwick, suggested a secret too heavy for her slight frame. Miss Marple, who had unravelled many a mystery in St. Mary Mead, knew that fear often betrayed knowledge, and Elvira's fear was palpable. The train robbery, Canon Pennyfather's disappearance, and the shadowy dealings tied to Bess Sedgwick formed a web, and Elvira, willingly or not, was caught in its strands. Miss Marple's musings were interrupted by the soft tread of footsteps. Elvira entered the lounge, her auburn hair pinned neatly, but her eyes shadowed with strain. She wore a pale blue dress, its elegance marred by a crumpled hem, as though she had dressed in haste. She hesitated, scanning the room, then chose a table near the far wall, half hidden by a potted fern. Miss Marple, her needles clicking gently, watched as Elvira ordered tea, her voice barely audible. The girl's hands trembled as she unfolded a napkin, and her gaze darted to the entrance as if expecting pursuit. The opportunity was too perfect to ignore. Miss Marple gathered her knitting and approached, her smile as disarming as a village vicar's. "May I join you, my dear?" she asked, her tone warm. "It's so pleasant to have company, and you seem a little lonely." Elvira started, her teacup rattling. "Oh, yes, of course," she said, her politeness automatic. "Please sit down." Miss Marple settled into the chair opposite, her movements slow to put the girl at ease. "I'm Miss Marple," she said, "just visiting London for a spell. And you, my dear, are you staying long at Bertram's?" Elvira's lips twitched, a faint attempt at a smile. "I'm not sure. It depends." Her voice was soft, with a trace of an accent Miss Marple couldn't place. Perhaps continental, from a childhood abroad. "It's a charming hotel," Miss Marple continued, her needles resuming their rhythm, "though I imagine it's quite overwhelming for a young lady. All these grand people like Lady Sedgwick. Such a striking woman, don't you think?" Elvira's fingers tightened on her cup, her knuckles whitening. "Yes, she's very striking." The words were clipped, and her eyes flicked to the door again. Miss Marple's voice remained gentle, but her mind was sharp. "You seem troubled, my dear. I don't mean to pry, but in my village, St. Mary Mead, I've often found that sharing a worry lightens it. And you remind me of a girl there, who once got herself into a tangle over a young man. Nothing serious, but she was dreadfully frightened until she spoke up." Elvira's gaze met Miss Marple's, and for a moment the girl's guard wavered. "It's not a young man," she said almost inaudibly. "It's complicated. I don't know what to do." Miss Marple leaned forward, her expression all kindness. "Then tell me, my dear. I'm quite harmless, and I've heard many secrets in my time. They're safe with me." The words hung between them, and Elvira's resolve seemed to crumble. She glanced around, ensuring no one was near, then spoke in a rush. "It's about my inheritance. I'm to come into it when I turn 21, in a few months. It's a lot of money, more than I ever wanted. But there are people. They want it. They're pressuring me." Miss Marple's needles paused, though her face showed only concern. "People, my dear. Who would pressure a young girl like you?" Elvira's voice dropped to a whisper. "I can't say. But they're here, in the hotel. They know things about me, about my family. They say if I don't help them, I'll lose everything. And Canon Pennyfather—" She stopped, her breath catching. Miss Marple's heart quickened, but her tone remained steady. "The Canon, your guardian. His disappearance must be a terrible worry. Do you think it's connected?" Elvira's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back. "I don't know. He was so kind, but so absent-minded. He had papers, schedules, notes. He showed them to me once, said they were for his conference. But someone else wanted them. They asked me to get them, and I couldn't. Then he vanished." Miss Marple's mind raced. The Canon's notebook, with its list of mail train times, had been a key to the robbery. Elvira's admission suggested she had been coerced, perhaps to steal it. "My dear," she said softly, "this is a heavy burden. Have you told the police? Chief Inspector Davy is a good man." Elvira shook her head violently. "I can't. They'd find out. They're watching me. I got a note yesterday telling me to keep quiet. If I talk, they'll—" She trailed off, her face ashen. Miss Marple patted her hand, her touch light but firm. "You're braver than you think, my dear. But you mustn't face this alone. Let me help you. Have you seen these people? Do you know their names?" Elvira hesitated, then leaned closer. "There's a woman. She's important here. She scares me. And a man, not a guest. I saw him outside in a cafe near the hotel. I gave him something. A package. I didn't want to, but they said it was the only way to keep the Canon safe." Miss Marple's thoughts aligned like pieces of a quilt. The woman was surely Bess Sedgwick, whose influence hung over the hotel like a storm cloud. The man, a stranger, could be a courier for the robberies. Loot. "This package," she said carefully, "was it heavy? Papers, perhaps?" Elvira's voice was barely audible. "Small, but heavy, wrapped in brown paper. I don't know what was in it. They didn't tell me." Miss Marple nodded, her mind cataloguing details. The package, delivered outside the hotel, suggested the stolen bonds or gold moved to avoid detection. Elvira's role, coerced or not, made her a link in the chain. "You've done well to tell me," she said. "Now, my dear, you must be careful. Stay where there are people, and if you feel unsafe, come to me. I'm in room 204. Elvira's eyes searched Miss Marple's, a flicker of hope breaking through her fear. "Thank you," she whispered. "I didn't think anyone would understand." Miss Marple smiled, her expression as comforting as a fireside. "We old ladies have our uses, my dear." As Elvira rose, clutching her handbag, Miss Marple noted the bulge inside, another letter perhaps, or something heavier. The girl hurried out, her steps unsteady, and Miss Marple leaned back, her tea forgotten. The lounge was quieter now, with only a few guests lingering. Miss Marple's needles resumed their dance, but her thoughts were far from wool. Elvira's confession had illuminated the shadows. Bess Sedgwick, the orchestrator, was using the girl to secure her inheritance, a prize to fund her schemes. The package, likely robbery loot, confirmed the hotel's role as a nexus. But the canon's fate remained a puzzle. Was he a prisoner, or had his usefulness ended? In St. Mary Mead, a blackmailer had once kept a victim alive to ensure compliance. Bess, with her ruthless charm, might do the same. Miss Marple decided to seek Chief Inspector Davy. She found him in the hotel's library, a wood-panelled room lined with leather-bound volumes. He was studying a map, his finger tracing a route from London to Wychwood. He looked up as she entered, his broad face lighting with recognition. "Miss Marple," he said, folding the map, "you've that look again. What's on your mind?" She closed the door, her voice low. "I've spoken with Elvira Blake, Chief Inspector. She's frightened and in deep. She's being pressured over her inheritance by someone powerful in the hotel. I believe it's Lady Sedgwick." Davy's eyebrows rose, but he nodded. "Go on." "She mentioned a package," Miss Marple continued, "delivered to a man outside the hotel. Small, heavy, wrapped in brown paper. And the canon's papers. She was asked to steal them, but didn't. His disappearance followed." Davy leaned forward, his chair creaking. "A package, you say? That fits. We found a wrapper in an alley near here, brown paper, traces of ink. Could be bonds, or even gold bars, melted down. And the canon's papers. Those train times were gold to the robbers." Miss Marple's eyes gleamed. "Elvira's being used, Chief Inspector. She's terrified, but she knows more than she says. And Bess Sedgwick is the key. Her influence over the staff, her secret meetings, they all point to her." Davy scribbled a note, his jaw tight. "I've got men watching Sedgwick, but she's slippery. No hard evidence yet. That key you saw her pass to Humphreys, room 3 and 12, you thought?" "Yes," Miss Marple said. "I checked the corridor last night. The door's scratched as if forced. It's empty, but not unused." Davy's eyes narrowed. "I'll get a warrant. If there's loot in there, we'll find it. Anything else on Elvira?" "She's vulnerable," Miss Marple said, "but not helpless. She trusts me a little. If we protect her, she might tell us more. In St. Mary Mead, a girl once hid a thief's loot out of fear. Elvira's not so different." Davy rubbed his chin, his expression a mix of respect and urgency. "You're a wonder, Miss Marple. I'll put a man on Elvira, discreetly. And I'll check that room tonight. Stay sharp, will you? This place is a snake pit." Miss Marple smiled faintly. "I've dealt with snakes before, Chief Inspector." She left the library, her umbrella tapping the floor, and returned to the lounge. The room was nearly empty, save for a waiter clearing cups. She watched him, noting his quick glances towards the reception desk, where Mr. Humphreys was sorting keys. The staff, she realized, were a network, bound by fear or loyalty to Bess. In St. Mary Mead, a postman had once carried stolen letters for a price. Bertram's was grander, but the game was the same. As noon approached, Miss Marple decided on a walk to the nearby square, hoping to clear her mind. The air was sharp, with a hint of autumn smoke. She strolled past a cafe, its windows steamed from within, and paused. Inside, Elvira sat at a corner table, her head bent over a cup. Opposite her was a man, lean and sharp-featured, in a dark coat. He leaned close, his gestures urgent, and Elvira's face was taut with fear. Miss Marple's heart sank. The man matched the maid's description of Bess's visitor. A courier, perhaps, or worse. she lingered by a lamppost, feigning interest in a shop window. The man handed Elvira a small parcel, no larger than a book, and she slipped it into her handbag. He left abruptly, his collar turned up, and Elvira remained, her hands shaking. Miss Marple considered approaching, but hesitated. Confrontation might push the girl further into danger. Instead, she noted the cafe's name, the Willow, and the man's features. A thin scar on his jaw, a slight limp. Details, she knew, were the threads of truth. Returning to the hotel, Miss Marple felt the weight of her discoveries. Elvira's secret was a fragile thing, like a bird in a storm. Bess Sedgwick, with her glittering presence, was the storm's heart, bending the hotel to her will. The package, the canon's papers, the empty room, all were pieces of a puzzle, and Miss Marple, who had solved many in St. Mary Mead, was determined to fit them together. She would watch Elvira, protect her if she could, and wait for Bess to make a mistake, for even the cleverest criminals, she knew, left a stitch undone. Chapter 6. The hotel's façade, the afternoon light filtered through the tall windows of Bertram's hotel, casting intricate patterns on the lounge's polished floor. Miss Jane Marple, ensconced in her favoured armchair, appeared absorbed in her knitting, the soft click of her needles blending with the murmur of conversation. A silver tea tray sat before her, the pot steaming gently, but her attention was elsewhere. The hotel, with its air of timeless elegance, had revealed cracks in its façade. Elvira Blake's confession, Bess Sedgwick's shadowy dealings, and the lingering mystery of Canon Pennyfather's disappearance. Miss Marple, who had peeled back the polite veneer of St. Mary Mead to expose its secrets, sensed that Bertram's was no ordinary establishment. It was a stage, meticulously set, and she was determined to uncover the drama unfolding behind the curtains. The lounge was quieter than usual, with only a scattering of guests, an elderly general poring over a chessboard, a young woman scribbling in a notebook, and a businessman muttering into a telephone. Miss Marple's eyes, sharp behind her spectacles, noted the staff's subtle agitation. A waiter, clearing a table, moved with a stiffness that belied his usual grace, and the head porter, stationed near the entrance, checked his watch too often. The atmosphere, she thought, was like a village before a storm, calm on the surface, but charged with unseen tension. Her thoughts returned to her conversation with Chief Inspector Davy the previous evening. He had shared troubling discoveries about Bertram's records, uncovered during a discreet review of the hotel's ledgers. Guests who never checked out, their bills settled in cash, staff with references that led to dead ends, and payments to suppliers who existed only on paper. "It's a front," Davy had said, his voice low. "Not the whole place, mind you, but enough to make my skin crawl." Miss Marple, knitting by the fire, had nodded. The hotel's perfection, its seamless service, its loyal staff, was too deliberate, like a painting with no flaws. In St. Mary Mead, a baker's immaculate shop had once hidden a gambling ring, his cheery smile masking a ledger of debts. Bertram's, she suspected, played a similar game on a grander scale. She sipped her tea, considering the pieces. The train robbery's loot, bonds, cash, perhaps gold, needed a safe haven, and Bertram's, with its private rooms and discreet staff, was ideal. Bess Sedgwick, with her commanding presence, was the likely architect, using Elvira Blake's Inheritance as a prize. The canon's disappearance, tied to his notebook of train schedules, was no coincidence. And the crates, moved under Bess's orders, hinted at stolen goods hidden in plain sight. But the hotel itself intrigued her most. Its façade of respectability was a shield, and Miss Marple, who had seen through many such shields, was determined to pierce it. Her reverie was broken by a soft cough. Mr. Humphreys, the manager, stood nearby, his polished demeanour tinged with unease. "Miss Marple," he said, his smile tight, "I trust everything is to your satisfaction." "Oh, quite," she replied, her tone warm. "Bertram's is a marvel. Such attention to detail, though I imagine it's a challenge keeping such a large staff in order." Humphrey's eyes flickered, but he nodded. "We pride ourselves on discipline, madam. Our staff are carefully chosen." "I'm sure," Miss Marple said, her needles clicking. "Though I did notice a young porter last night, near the service entrance. He seemed preoccupied. Moving crates, I believe." The manager's hand twitched, his pen slipping from his fingers. "Crates? Merely supplies, I assure you. Linens, provisions, the usual." "Of course," Miss Marple said, her smile unwavering, "though they looked rather heavy for linens. In my village, St. Mary Mead, a grocer once stored stolen clocks in flour sacks. Quite clever, until he was caught." Humphrey's face paled, but he recovered quickly. "A charming anecdote, madam. If you'll excuse me, I have duties to attend." He retreated, his steps brisk, and Miss Marple leaned back, satisfied. The manager's unease confirmed her suspicions. The crates were no ordinary cargo, and the staff were complicit, whether through loyalty or fear. She decided to explore further. Rising, she tucked her knitting into her bag and made her way to the hotel's lower corridors, feigning a search for the reading room. The hallways, lined with oak panelling and brass sconces, were hushed, their silence heavy. She descended a narrow staircase marked "Staff Only," her umbrella tapping softly. At the bottom, a service door led to a basement corridor, its walls bare and its air damp. Miss Marple paused, listening. A faint clatter echoed from a distance, followed by muffled voices. She moved closer, her steps cautious, and peered around a corner. Two porters stood by a stack of wooden crates, their lids pried open. One, the shoeist, wiry man she had seen in the gardens, was inspecting a bundle wrapped in oilcloth. "Careful," he hissed to his companion, a younger man with a nervous tic. "If these get damaged, she'll have our heads." The younger porter glanced around, his voice low. "What's in 'em anyway? Feels like bricks." "None of your business," the first snapped. "Just stack 'em like she said. Basement vault, no questions." Miss Marple's heart quickened. The crates, identical to those in the unmarked van, were being moved to a vault, a hiding place for the robbery's loot, she was certain. She recalled a case in St. Mary Mead, where a carpenter had concealed smuggled brandy in his workshop's cellar. Bertram's basement, with its labyrinth of rooms, was a grander version. She retreated silently, her mind alight with possibilities. The vault, if she could find it, might hold the key to the hotel's secrets. Back in the lounge, she settled into her chair, her tea cold, but her thoughts ablaze. The porter's fear, their mention of she, pointed to Bess Sedgwick. The woman's influence was a thread running through every clue. The crates, Elvira's coercion, the canon's absence. but the hotel's role was broader. Its staff, from porters to maids, operated with a precision that suggested training beyond service. Miss Marple's eyes scanned the room, noting a waiter who lingered too long near a guest's table, his ear cocked to their conversation. The staff, she realized, were not just complicit. They were operatives bound to a hidden purpose. Her thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of Chief Inspector Davy, his broad frame casting a shadow across her table. He carried a file, its edges worn, and his face was etched with fatigue. "Miss Marple," he said, sinking into the chair opposite, "you're a sight for sore eyes. This place is giving me ulcers." She smiled faintly, setting her knitting aside. "It's a complex puzzle, Chief Inspector. Have you found anything new?" Davy opened the file, his voice low. "Plenty, and none of it good. That room 312 you mentioned. We got in last night, empty, as you said, but the lock's been tampered with, and there were marks on the floor, heavy objects dragged recently. No loot, but someone's been using it." Miss Marple's lips pursed, a temporary cache perhaps. Before moving, "The goods to the basement." Davy's eyes sharpened. "Basement? You've been snooping, haven't you?" "Merely observing," she said, her tone mild. "I saw porters moving crates down there to a vault. They spoke of her orders. I believe they meant Lady Sedgwick." Davy scribbled a note, his jaw tight. "A vault, you say? That fits. We found a blueprint in the manager's office. Old plans from when the hotel was built. There's a strong room in the basement, reinforced, hidden behind a false wall. Used to store valuables for guests back in the day." Miss Marple's eyes gleamed. "And now, perhaps, for less savoury treasures. In St. Mary Mead, a miller hid stolen silver in his granary. A vault is far more secure." Davy leaned forward, his voice a whisper. "I'm planning a raid, but I need more. Humphreys is cagey, and the staff are loyal to a fault. I checked their records. Half the porters have no past, like they sprang from nowhere. And the guests, some check in, pay cash, and vanish. Ghosts, all of them." Miss Marple nodded, her mind aligning the pieces. "The hotel is a machine, Chief Inspector. Its guests, its staff, its very walls serve a purpose. Bess Sedgwick is the engineer, but the machine was built before her. Look to the owners, perhaps, or the manager's ties." Davy's eyebrows rose, a flicker of admiration. "You're ahead of me, as usual. I dug into Humphreys. Clean record, but he's got a brother in prison. Embezzlement. Could be a pressure point. And the hotel's owned by a trust, murky as mud. Shell companies, foreign accounts. We're tracing it, but it's slow." Miss Marple's needles resumed their rhythm, a counterpoint to her thoughts. "Slow is wise, Chief Inspector. A machine like this doesn't yield to haste. But Elvira Blake, she's a weak link. Her fear makes her vulnerable, but also valuable. If you can protect her, she may reveal more." Davy nodded, closing his file. "I've got a man watching her, as you suggested. She's been to that cafe again, the Willow. Met the same man, scar on his jaw, limps. We're tailing him, but he's careful. Slipped us twice." Miss Marple's lips twitched, a faint smile. "Careful men make mistakes, Chief Inspector. In St. Mary Mead, a poacher thought he'd outsmarted the gamekeeper, but he left footprints in the mud. Your man will leave his mark." Davy chuckled, rising. "You're a tonic, Miss Marple. I'll check that vault quietly. "Keep your eyes open, will you? This place is a powder keg." "I always do," she said, her smile serene. As Davy left, Miss Marple leaned back, her tea untouched. The lounge was nearly empty now, save for a maid dusting a mirror. She watched the girl, noting her quick glances toward the reception desk, where Humphreys was sorting papers. The staff, she thought, were a web, each strand tied to Bess or the hotel's hidden masters. In St. Mary Mead, a seamstress had once woven a similar web, her needles hiding coded messages. Bertram's was more complex, but its threads could be unravelled. She decided on a bold move. Rising, she approached the reception desk, her manner as guileless as a village spinster. "Mr. Humphreys," she said, "I seem to have misplaced my room key. Could you provide a spare?" The manager, distracted, barely looked up. "Of course, Miss Marple. One moment." He rummaged in a drawer, his hands unsteady, and handed her a key. As he did, Miss Marple's glance fell on a ledger, its pages marked with cryptic symbols, circles, crosses, numbers. She memorized a line. "Vault 23 BS. "Thank you," she said, pocketing the key. She returned to her chair, her heart racing. The ledger's entry confirmed her suspicions. Bess Sedgwick was moving something to the vault tonight, but 11. The robbery's loot, she guessed, or perhaps evidence tying her to the cannon's fate. Miss Marple considered alerting Davy, but hesitated. Proof was needed, and she was best suited to find it. As evening fell, the lounge filled with guests, their chatter a soft hum. Miss Marple, knitting quietly, watched the room. A waiter, the one who had passed Elvira a note, approached the desk, whispering to Humphreys. The manager nodded, his face tense, and the waiter retreated. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. The staff's coordination was military, their loyalty absolute. But loyalty, she knew, could be brittle under pressure. She resolved to investigate the basement again, closer to 11. Feigning fatigue, she retired to her room, where she penned a brief note to Davy, detailing the ledger's entry and her plan. She sealed it and left it with a maid, instructing her to deliver it to the inspector if she didn't return by midnight. The precaution, she hoped, was unnecessary, but St. Mary Mead had taught her to expect the worst. At 10:30, Miss Marple slipped into the service corridor, her black shawl blending with the shadows. The basement was colder now, its air thick, with the scent of stone and oil. She moved silently, her umbrella a makeshift cane, and reached the corridor where she had seen the crates. The crates were gone, but a heavy door, set into the wall, caught her eye. Its lock was new, its surface unmarked save for a faint scratch. The vault, she thought, her pulse quickening. She pressed her ear to the door, hearing nothing but the hum of distant pipes. Then a soft click, a key turning. She retreated behind a stack of boxes, her breath shallow. The door opened and a figure emerged. Bess Sedgwick, her blonde hair catching the dim light, her coat draped over one arm. She carried a small case, its leather gleaming, and her expression was one of fierce concentration. Behind her, a porter followed, his arms laden with a crate. "Lock it!" Bess snapped, her voice low. The porter obeyed, his hands trembling, and they vanished down the corridor. Miss Marple waited, counting to 10, then approached the door. The lock was beyond her skill, but the scratch suggested recent use. She memorized its shape, a Yale heavy-duty, and retreated, her mind alight with certainty. The case, the crate, Bessie's presence, all pointed to the vault as the robbery's heart. The canon, she feared, was either there or lost forever. Back in her room, Miss Marple sat by the window, the city's lights a distant glow. The hotel's façade, so perfect by day, was a lie exposed by night. Bess Sedgwick, with her nerve and cunning, was its architect, but the staff, the guests, the very walls were her tools. Miss Marple, who had unmasked liars in St. Mary Mead, knew the truth was close. She would share her findings with Davy, watch Elvira, and wait for Bess to falter. For even the grandest façades, she knew, crumbled under the weight of their secrets. Chapter 7. The Canon Reappears. The morning mist clung to the windows of Bertram's hotel, softening the outlines of the lounge where Miss Jane Marple sat, her knitting needles moving with their familiar rhythm. The room, with its velvet drapes and gleaming silver, held the hush of a cathedral, but the air was charged with a new undercurrent. News had spread like wildfire among the staff and guests. Canon Pennyfather, missing for nearly a week, had returned. His sudden reappearance, as abrupt as his disappearance, stirred whispers and sidelong glances. Miss Marple, sipping her tea, observed the scene with a keen eye. In St. Mary Mead, a farmer's unexpected return from a business trip had once unravelled a smuggling scheme. The canon's return, she suspected, was no less significant. The lounge was busier than usual, with guests lingering over their newspapers, their curiosity thinly veiled. A dowager in a feathered hat murmured to her companion about that poor clergyman, while a young man in a tweed suit scribbled notes, perhaps a journalist sniffing a story. Miss Marple's attention, however, was on the staff. The head porter, usually a model of composure, fumbled a guest's luggage, and a maid's hands shook as she poured coffee. The hotel's polished routine, so carefully maintained, seemed to falter, as if the canon's presence had jarred a hidden mechanism. Miss Marple had learned of the canon's return at breakfast, when a flustered Mr. Humphreys announced it to the dining-room. The clergyman, he said, had been found wandering near a railway station, disoriented but unharmed, and was now resting in his room under a doctor's care. Chief Inspector Davy, summoned at dawn, was questioning him, and the hotel buzzed with speculation. Miss Marple, buttering her toast, had noted Humphreys's strained smile and the quick glances he exchanged with a waiter. The canon's return, she thought, was not the resolution it appeared, but a new act in the drama unfolding at Bertram's. She set her knitting aside and rose, her black shawl draped over her shoulders. The corridor to the canon's room was hushed, its carpet muffling her steps. A constable stood guard outside room 1-8, his face impassive. Miss Marple, feigning confusion, approached with a disarming smile. "Oh dear, I must have taken a wrong turn," she said. "I was looking for the reading room. Is this where poor Canon Pennyfather is staying?" The constable, a young man with a ruddy complexion, softened. "Yes, ma'am, but he's resting. The inspector's with him now. Reading room's down the hall, second left." "Thank you, my dear," Miss Marple said, her eyes noting the door's new lock, its brass gleaming. She retreated, her mind cataloguing details. The constable's presence suggested Davy's caution, and the lock hinted at more than a clergyman's safety. In St. Mary Mead, a locked shed had once concealed a stolen motorbike, its owner claiming it was for repairs. The canon, she suspected, was both victim and clue. Back in the lounge, Miss Marple settled into her chair, her tea replenished by a nervous maid. She was joined shortly by Chief Inspector Davy, his broad frame filling the armchair opposite. His face was etched with fatigue, but his eyes were sharp, glinting with the intensity of a man closing in on his quarry. "Miss Marple," he said, keeping his voice low, "you've heard about the canon, I take it?" "Indeed, Chief Inspector," she replied, her tone mild. "A most fortunate return. What does he say?" Davy leaned closer, his words barely audible over the lounge's hum. "Not much that makes sense. He's dazed, like he's been drugged. Says he was in Lucerne, at his conference, but his story's full of holes. He remembers a train, a sharp pain in his head and waking in a strange house, with no idea how he got there. He was found near King's Cross, mumbling about timetables." Miss Marple's needles paused, her mind racing. "A strange house, you say? Did he describe it?" "Vaguely," Davy said, pulling a notebook from his pocket. "Old creaky floors, smell of damp." He heard a woman's voice, sharp, giving orders. Couldn't see her, though. His head was foggy. He thinks he was there a few days. Then someone bundled him into a car and left him at the station. Miss Marple's lips pursed, a faint crease forming between her brows. "A woman's voice. That's telling, Chief Inspector. And his notebook, still in his possession?" Davy shook his head. "Gone. His room was untouched, but the notebook's missing. Whoever took him wanted those train times, I'd wager. The robbery's route was in there, clear as day." Miss Marple nodded, her thoughts aligning. The canon's abduction, she realized, was a calculated move to secure his notes and silence him. His return, however, was puzzling. Why release him? In St. Mary Mead, a thief had once let a witness go to deflect suspicion, claiming the man had wandered off. The canon's dazed state suggested a similar ploy, meant to muddy the waters. "This woman's voice," she said softly. "Could it be Lady Sedgwick's? Her presence dominates this hotel, and her orders move crates and men alike." Davy's eyes narrowed, a flicker of agreement. "I've thought the same. But we need more than a voice. Sedgwick's been here every night, according to the staff, dining, charming the guests. If she's behind this, she's got an army of alibis." Miss Marple's needles resumed their rhythm, a counterpoint to her thoughts. "An army, yes, but armies have weak links. The staff are loyal, but they're frightened. And Elvira Blake, she's terrified of Bess. The canon's return might unsettle her further. She may know where he was held." Davy scribbled a note, his jaw tight. "I'll talk to Elvira again. She's been dodging me, sticking to that cafe, the Willow. My man saw her there yesterday with that scarred fellow. No package this time, but they were arguing." Miss Marple's eyes gleamed. "An argument suggests cracks, Chief Inspector. Elvira's fear is her weakness, but also her strength. If you can gain her trust, she'll break. In St. Mary Mead, a girl once confessed to hiding stolen jewels because her lover threatened her. Elvira's not so different." Davy leaned back, his chair creaking. "You're building a case, Miss Marple. Sedgwick as the puppet master, the hotel as her stage, the canon as a pawn. But why bring him back? If he's a risk, why not? He trailed off, grimacing. Miss Marple's voice was calm but firm, because his death would draw too much attention. A missing clergyman is a mystery. A dead one is a scandal. His return, dazed and confused, makes him seem unreliable. It's a clever move, but risky. The woman's voice he heard, it's a thread we must pull. Davy nodded, closing his notebook. I'm checking that vault you saw. Got a man posing as a maintenance worker, sniffing around the basement. And room 3112, nothing new, but we're watching it. Sedgwick's key is still a puzzle. Humphreys clams up when I mention it. Miss Marple's lips twitched, a faint smile. Mr. Humphreys is a cog in the machine, Chief Inspector. He knows more than he says, but he's afraid. Watch him too. In St. Mary Mead, a shopkeeper's nervous tics betrayed his role in a theft. Humphrey's pen-twirling is much the same. Davy chuckled, rising. You're a marvel, Miss Marple. I'll keep you posted. Stay safe, will you? This place is a viper's nest. I've handled vipers before, she said, her smile serene. As Davy left, Miss Marple leaned back, her tea untouched. The lounge was quieter now, with only a few guests lingering. She watched a waiter, the one who had passed Elvira a note, as he polished a tray with excessive care. His eyes darted to the reception desk, where Humphreys was sorting mail. The staff, she thought, were a network, each member tethered to Bess's will. But the cannon's return had shaken them, like a stone dropped in a still pond. She decided to seek out Elvira, hoping to coax more from the girl. Rising, she made her way to the hotel's tea room, a cosy nook where Elvira often retreated. The room was empty save for the girl, who sat by a window, her tea untouched. Her face was pale, her hands twisting a handkerchief. Miss Marple approached, her manner as gentle as a village aunt's. "May I join you, my dear?" she asked. "You look as if you could use a friend." Elvira started, her eyes wide. "Oh, Miss Marple." "Yes, please." Her voice was brittle, like glass about to shatter. Miss Marple settled into the chair opposite, her shawl draped neatly. "I heard about Canon Pennyfather," she said. "Such a relief, isn't it? Though he must be dreadfully shaken." Elvira's fingers tightened on the handkerchief, her knuckles white. "Yes, it's good he's back. I was so worried." Her words lacked conviction, and her eyes avoided Miss Marple's. "You've been through a lot, my dear," Miss Marple said, her tone soothing. "All this worry about your guardian and those people pressuring you. It's a heavy burden for someone so young." Elvira's breath caught, and she looked up, her guard faltering. "How do you— I mean, it's nothing. I'm fine, is she?" Marple's smile was kind but piercing. "In St. Mary Mead, I knew a girl who carried a secret for her brother. She was frightened like you, but she found courage when she shared it. You mentioned a woman, someone important. Did she have anything to do with the canon's absence?" Elvira's face crumpled, and she leaned forward, her voice a whisper. "I don't know. I swear I don't. But she knew he was gone. She told me to keep quiet, said it was for his safety. I didn't want to, but she's so powerful. I couldn't say no." Miss Marple's heart quickened, but her expression remained calm. "This woman, she's here, isn't she? Lady Sedgwick, perhaps?" Elvira's eyes widened, a gasp escaping her lips. She nodded, almost involuntarily. "Please, Don't tell anyone. She'll know it was me. She always knows." Miss Marple patted her hand, her touch light but firm. "You're safe with me, my dear, but you must tell the police. Chief Inspector Davy will protect you. This woman, she's dangerous, but she's not invincible. You're stronger than you think." Elvira's tears spilled over, but she wiped them away, her jaw set. "I'll try, but if she finds out—" She trailed off, her fear palpable. Miss Marple nodded, her mind racing. Elvira's confirmation of Bess's involvement was a breakthrough, but the girl's terror underscored the woman's reach. The cannon's return, she realized, was a gambit to quell suspicion, but it had exposed a flaw. Bess's control was not absolute. In St. Mary Mead, a blackmailer's hold had crumbled when his victim spoke out. Elvira, if guided, could be the key to unravelling Bess's web. As the tea-room filled with guests, Miss Marple rose, urging Elvira to stay among people. "Come to me if you need me, my dear," she said. "Room 204. I'm always awake." Elvira nodded, her face a mix of fear and resolve. Miss Marple returned to the lounge, her thoughts alight with possibilities. The canon's story, his abduction, the strange house, the woman's voice, pointed to a hideout, perhaps near London. The robbery's loot, stored in the basement vault, was Bess's prize, but the canon's release suggested a shift in her plans. Was she preparing to flee, or tightening her grip? Miss Marple's eyes scanned the room, noting a porter who lingered near the reception desk, his ear cocked to Humphreys's conversation. The staff, she thought, were Bess's eyes and ears, but they were also her weakness. She decided to investigate the basement again, hoping to glimpse the vault's contents. Feigning a headache, she retired to her room, where she changed into a darker shawl and sturdy shoes. At dusk, she slipped into the service corridor, her movements silent. The basement was colder now, its shadows deeper. She reached the vault door, its lock unyielding, but a faint light spilled from a nearby storeroom. She crept closer, her breath shallow, and peered inside. A single bulb illuminated a table where a porter was sorting papers, bonds by their look, stamped with official seals. Beside them lay a small gold bar, its surface scratched. The porter, the nervous young man from the crates, glanced around, his face pale. Miss Marple retreated, her heart pounding. The bonds and gold, part of the robbery's haul, confirmed the vault's purpose. Bess, she thought, was consolidating her gains, perhaps preparing to move them. Back in her room, Miss Marple sat by the window, the city's lights a distant blur. The canon's reappearance had shifted the game, exposing Bess's hand. The hotel, with its loyal staff and hidden rooms, was her fortress. But fortresses fell when their foundations cracked. Elvira's fear, the staff's unease, the canon's fragmented tale, all were cracks Miss Marple could widen. She would share her findings with Davy, watch Bess, and protect Elvira. In St. Mary Mead, she had learned that truth. Like a buried seed always broke through, and Miss Marple, with her quiet persistence, was its gardener. Chapter 8. A Dangerous Encounter. The evening shadows lengthened across the polished floors of Bertram's hotel, their edges softened by the glow of crystal chandeliers. Miss Jane Marple, seated in the dining room, savoured her cream of asparagus, soup with apparent tranquillity, but her senses were alert. The room hummed with the clink of silver and the murmur of conversation, yet an undercurrent of tension pulsed beneath the surface, like a river stirring before a storm. Canon Pennyfather's unexpected return had unsettled the hotel's carefully curated calm, and Miss Marple, with her knack for sensing ripples in human behaviour, knew the balance had shifted. The train robbery, the Canon's abduction, and Bess, Sedgwick's web of control were converging, and Bertram's, with its impeccable façade, was the crucible. Miss Marple's thoughts were anchored on her discoveries: the basement vault holding stolen bonds and gold, Elvira Blake's coerced role, and Bess Sedgwick's iron grip over the staff. The Canon's tale of a strange house and a commanding woman's voice had sharpened her focus on Bess, whose charisma masked a ruthless mind. Yet the hotel's deeper machinery, its ghost guests' cryptic ledgers and shadowy owners, remained elusive. Miss Marple, who had unravelled the secrets of St. Mary Mead's quiet lanes, was determined to expose Bertram's heart, but she knew the task carried risks. The hotel was a labyrinth, and its keepers were watchful. Her meal finished, she lingered, over a cup of tea, her black lace mittens folded neatly beside her. The dining room was thinning, with guests drifting to the lounge or their rooms. She observed the staff. A waiter moved with forced nonchalance, his eyes flicking to the entrance. A maid clearing plates avoided meeting anyone's gaze. The air, Miss Marple thought, was thick with anticipation, as if the hotel itself were holding its breath. She recalled a St. Mary Mead grocer, whose nervous tics had betrayed his role in a theft ring. The staff here, she suspected, were similarly bound by fear, loyalty, or profit to Bess's schemes. Her reverie was broken by a sudden stir at the dining room's entrance. Bess Sedgwick swept in, her sapphire dress catching the light like a wave. She paused, surveying the room with the assurance of a queen, then made her way to a corner table where Mr. Humphreys awaited. The manager rose, his bow stiff, and they exchanged words too low to hear. Miss Marple, stirring her tea, noted Bess's sharp gestures and Humphreys's clenched hands. Their conversation, brief but intense, ended with Bess slipping him a folded paper, her expression unreadable. Humphreys pocketed it, his face pale, and Bess left as swiftly as she had arrived. Miss Marple's heart quickened. The paper, like the key she had seen Bess pass days earlier, was no trifle. It could be an order, a map, or a list, another thread in the tapestry of crime woven through Bertram's. She considered following Humphreys, but dismissed the idea. Her strength lay in watching, not chasing. Instead, she resolved to probe the hotel's underbelly, where secrets were stored. The basement vault, glimpsed the previous night, was her target, but she needed a pretext to linger there without arousing suspicion. Feigning a headache, she approached the reception desk, where a young clerk stood in Humphreys's absence. "My dear," she said, her voice tremulous, "I've mislaid my spectacles. I think I left them in the reading room, but I took a wrong turn earlier, near the service stairs. Could you direct me?" The clerk, eager to please, offered to fetch them, but Miss Marple demurred. No, I'll manage. Just point me the right way. My old legs need the exercise." The clerk, smiling, gave directions, unaware that Miss Marple's wrong turn was deliberate. She thanked him and made her way to the service corridor, her umbrella tapping softly. The hallway, dim and narrow, led to the basement stairs. its silence broken only by the distant hum of pipes. The basement was colder than before, its air heavy with the scent of damp stone. Miss Marple moved cautiously, her shawl blending with the shadows. She reached the corridor where she had seen the vault door, its heavy lock gleaming under a bare bulb. No sound came from within, but a faint scuff mark on the floor suggested recent activity. She paused, listening, her senses honed by years of quiet observation. In St. Mary Mead, a locked barn had once yielded stolen paintings to her persistence. The vault, she hoped, would be as revealing. Her thoughts were shattered by a sudden noise, a sharp clatter, followed by voices. She slipped behind a stack of crates, her breath shallow, and peered out. 2 figures emerged from a side passage. Bess Sedgwick, her sapphire dress replaced by a dark coat, and a porter, the wiry man with a scar above his brow. Bess's voice was low but commanding, cutting through the stillness like a blade. "The plan must hold," she said. "No mistakes. The shipment leaves tonight, and I want no traces left." The porter nodded, his face tense. "It's ready, ma'am. Vault's secure and the van's waiting." But the old man, his coming back stirred things up. The staff are jumpy. Bess's lips curled, a flash of disdain. "Let them jump. The cannon's no threat. His head's muddled. Just keep the others in line. We're too close to falter." The porter hesitated, then lowered his voice. "And the girl? She's been talking to that old lady. If she cracks—" Bess's eyes narrowed, her voice icy. "She won't. I've made sure of it. Now move." The porter scurried off, and Bess lingered, her gaze sweeping the corridor. For a moment, Miss Marple feared she had been seen, but Bess turned and vanished into the shadows, her steps echoing. Miss Marple remained still, her heart pounding. The old lady was surely herself, and Elvira's talks with her had not gone unnoticed. Bess's confidence, though, was a misstep. Overconfidence, Miss Marple knew, often betrayed the cleverest criminals. The shipment confirmed her suspicions. The robbery's loot was being moved, likely to evade Davy's tightening net. But the cannon's return, dismissed by Bess, was a wild card. His muddled state, she thought, might hold truths yet to surface. She retreated from the basement, her mind racing. The encounter had been perilous, but it had yielded gold. Bess's plan was in motion, and the vault was central. She needed to alert Davy, but first she wanted to check on Elvira. The girl, under Bess's thumb, was a fragile link, and Miss Marple feared for her safety. Back in the lounge, she scanned the room, but Elvira was absent. A maid polishing a mirror caught her eye, and Miss Marple approached, her smile disarming. "My dear," she said, "have you seen Miss Blake? Say, thought she might be taking tea here." The maid, young and skittish, shook her head. "Not since lunch, ma'am. She was in her room, I think. Looked poorly." "Thank you," Miss Marple said, her unease growing. She made her way to Elvira's room, number 215, and knocked softly. No answer came. She tried again, her knuckles rapping with gentle insistence, but the silence was unbroken. A passing porter, carrying a tray, paused, his eyes curious. "Looking for Miss Blake, ma'am?" he asked. "Yes," Miss Marple said, her tone plaintive. "She promised to lend me a book, but she doesn't seem to be in." The porter shrugged. saw her head out about an hour ago. To that cafe, the Willow, maybe. She goes there a lot." Miss Marple thanked him, her mind alight with worry. Elvira, alone at the cafe, was vulnerable, especially if Bess suspected her disloyalty. She considered alerting Davy, but hesitated. Her evidence, though compelling, was circumstantial, and a premature move could endanger the girl further. Instead, she resolved to investigate the cafe herself. A bold step for a woman of her years, but necessary. In St. Mary Mead, she had once followed a suspicious delivery boy to a smuggler's den, her courage rewarded with truth. Bertram's demanded no less. She returned to her room, donning a darker coat and a plain hat to blend with the evening crowd. The city's lights glittered as she stepped into the square, the air sharp with the promise of rain. The Willow, a modest cafe 2 streets away, was aglow. Its windows steamed from within. Miss Marple entered, her umbrella tucked under her arm, and chose a table near the back, half hidden by a coat rack. The cafe was lively, with students and clerks chatting over coffee, but Elvira was nowhere in sight. Miss Marple ordered a pot of tea, her eyes scanning the room. A man at a corner table caught her attention. Lean with a scar on his jaw and a slight limp, he matched the description of Elvira's contact. He was alone, nursing a glass of whiskey, his gaze fixed on the door. Miss Marple's heart sank. Elvira had met him. She was gone, and the man's tense posture suggested trouble. She sipped her tea, her mind racing. The man, likely a courier for Bess, was a link to the loot's movement. If she could overhear him, she might learn more. Her chance came when the man rose, leaving his coat draped over the chair, and stepped outside to light a cigarette. Miss Marple, feigning a search for her gloves, moved closer to his table. A scrap of paper, half tucked under his glass, caught her eye. She glanced around, ensuring no one watched, and slipped it into her sleeve with the deftness of a pickpocket. Returning to her seat, she unfolded it under the table. A handwritten note in a sharp, angular script. "I vault clear by 1 a.m. Van to docks. E secured." The initials B.S. were scrawled at the bottom. Miss Marple's breath caught. The note confirmed Bess's plan. The loot was leaving tonight, bound for the docks, and Elvira, was "It secured." The word chilled her. Secured could mean protected, or something far darker. In St. Mary Mead, a girl secured by a blackmailer had been locked in a cellar. Elvira, she feared, was in grave danger. She left the cafe, her steps brisk despite her age, and returned to Bertram's. The lobby was quiet, its grandeur muted by the late hour. She sought out Chief Inspector Davy, finding him in the manager's office, poring over a stack of telegrams. His face lit with relief as she entered, closing the door behind her. "Miss Marple," he said, "you're a sight for sore eyes. I was about to send for you." "I've news, Chief Inspector," she said, producing the note. "Found at the Willow, left by the man with the scar. It's from Bess Sedgwick. I'm certain. The loot's moving tonight to the docks, and Elvira's in trouble." Davy read the note, his jaw tightening. "Good Lord, this is gold. E secured. That's not good. My man lost Elvira an hour ago, near the cafe. She never came back." Miss Marple's lips pursed, her voice steady despite her fear. "Bess knows Elvira's been talking to me. I overheard her in the basement, dismissing the cannon's return, but worried about the girl. She's tying up loose ends, Chief Inspector. We must find Elvira before the van leaves. Davy nodded, grabbing his coat. I'm calling in my team. We'll raid the vault at midnight, catch them in the act, and I'll send men to the docks. But Elvira, any idea where she might be? Miss Marple's eyes gleamed, her mind sifting details. The strange house the canon mentioned. Old, damp, creaky. It's near London, I'd wager, close enough for a quick drive. Bess's men took him there, and they may have Elvira now. Check. Abandoned properties near King's Cross, where the canon was found. Davy scribbled a note, his admiration clear. You're a wonder, Miss Marple. I'll get on it, but stay here, will you? This is getting dangerous. Miss Marple smiled faintly. I've faced danger before, Chief Inspector. In St. Mary Mead, a poacher once threatened me with a knife. He regretted it. Her tone was light, but her resolve was iron. Davy chuckled, though his eyes were grim. I don't doubt it. I'll post a man outside your room, just in case, and keep that note safe. It's evidence. Miss Marple returned to her room, her heart heavy, but her purpose clear. The note tucked into her knitting bag was a lifeline, but Elvira's fate weighed on her. She sat by the window, the city's lights a distant blur, and thought of St. Mary Mead, where a missing girl had been found in a barn, her courage sparked by a kind word. Elvira, she hoped, would find that courage too. As the clock neared 11, a soft thud startled her. A heavy vase, perched on a shelf above her door, had fallen, shattering on the floor. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. The shelf was sturdy, the vase secure. She had checked it that morning. This was no accident. Someone, perhaps alerted by her basement venture, had meant to harm her. In St. Mary Mead, a falling tile had once warned a vicar of a thief's trap. Miss Marple, undeterred, swept the shards aside and locked her door. She sat again, her knitting untouched, her mind racing. The dangerous encounter in the basement, the note, the vase, all were signs that Bess's machine was faltering. Shiosh Hotel, with its loyal staff and hidden vaults, was a fortress. But fortresses cracked under pressure. Miss Marple would share the note with Davy, watch for Elvira's return, and wait for Bess's next move. The truth, like a hidden spring, was rising, and Miss Marple, with her quiet tenacity, would guide it to the surface. Chapter 9. Elvira's Confession. The dawn light seeped through the lace curtains of Bertram's hotel, casting delicate shadows across the tea-room where Miss Jane Marple sat, her hands folded over her knitting bag. The room, with its chintz upholstery and porcelain teacups, exuded a fragile calm, but the events of the previous night had left a palpable strain. The shattered vase in her room, a deliberate warning, had sharpened Miss Marple's resolve, yet it was Elvira Blake's fate that weighed heaviest on her mind. The note she had found at the Willow, vault clear by 1 a.m., van to docks, secured, had confirmed Bess Sedgwick's plan to move the train robbery's loot and hinted at Elvira's peril. Miss Marple, whose quiet persistence had unravelled many a secret in St. Mary Mead, knew the hotel's polished surface was crumbling, and she was determined to seize the moment. The tea-room was nearly empty, its usual chatter subdued by the early hour. A lone waitress, her apron crisp but her eyes tired, moved between tables, and an elderly gentleman in a corner read his paper with studied indifference. Miss Marple, sipping her Earl Grey, reflected on her narrow escape. The vase, heavy enough to cause serious harm, had been no accident. Someone, likely alerted by her basement foray, sought to silence her. In St. Mary Mead, a falling brick had once warned a nosy postmistress of a smuggler's wrath. Miss Marple, undeterred, had informed Chief Inspector Davy of the incident and the note, urging him to search for Elvira near King's Cross, where Canon Pennyfather had been found. Now she waited, her senses attuned to the hotel's pulse. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft rustle. Elvira Blake entered, her auburn hair dishevelled and her face ashen, as though she had not slept. She wore a crumpled coat over a simple dress, and her hands clutched a small handbag with desperate intensity. She hesitated, scanning the room, then spotted Miss Marple and hurried to her table, her steps unsteady. "Miss Marple," she whispered, sinking into the chair opposite, I need to talk to you. I don't know who else to trust." Miss Marple's heart quickened, but her smile was as warm as a village hearth. "My dear, you look exhausted. Let me order you some tea. Then you can tell me everything, and I promise it will stay between us." Elvira nodded, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. The waitress brought a fresh pot, and Miss Marple poured, her movements deliberate to calm the girl. "Now," she said, "start at the beginning. You're safe here with me." Elvira's breath hitched, and she leaned forward, her voice barely audible. It's about my mother, Lady Sedgwick. She's behind everything. The robbery, the cannon, all of it. I didn't want to believe it, but I can't pretend any more." Miss Marple's needles, resting in her lap, remained still, but her mind raced. Elvira's revelation, though not unexpected, was a thunderclap. "Your mother?" she said softly, her tone inviting rather than probing. "That's a heavy burden, my dear. How did you come to know this?" Elvira's fingers twisted the edge of her handkerchief, her words tumbling out. "I've always known she was different. She left when I was a baby, and I grew up with guardians like the canon. But a year ago she found me, said she wanted to make things right. I was so happy. I thought she cared. But then she started asking about my inheritance. It's millions, tied up in a trust until I'm 21. She said she needed it for business, that it would secure our future." Miss Marple nodded, her expression one of gentle concern. "And this business, it wasn't legitimate, was it?" Elvira shook her head, her voice breaking. "No, she told me bits at first, said it was investments, partnerships. But then I saw things. Men coming to her room at night, packages changing hands. She made me help, said it was my duty as her daughter. I didn't want to, but she scared me. She's so strong, so sure, I couldn't say no." Miss Marple's eyes gleamed, though her face remained kind. "What did she ask you to do, my dear?" Elvira's gaze dropped, her cheeks flushing with shame. "Small things at first, passing messages, meeting people. But then, a week ago, she gave me a package. Brown paper, heavy, like a book, but denser. She said to take it to a man at the Willow, the one with the scar. I did it, but I felt sick. Later, I heard about the train robbery, and I knew. The package was part of it, bonds maybe, or gold. She used me to move stolen goods. Miss Marple's heart ached for the girl, but her mind was sharp, piecing together the strands. The package matched the robbery's loot, and Elvira's role explained her fear. "That was very brave, telling me this," she said. "And the canon, did your mother mention him?" Elvira's tears spilled over, and she wiped them with her handkerchief. "Yes, she said he had papers she needed, train schedules for her partners. I was supposed to get them, but I couldn't. He was so kind, always talking about his conferences. When he disappeared, she told me he'd wandered off, but I didn't believe her. Last night she locked me in a room, said it was for my safety, because I'd been talking to you. I heard her on the phone saying the canon's return was a problem, but she'd handle it. I escaped this morning through a window. I had to find you." Miss Marple's breath caught, but her voice remained steady. "You did right, my dear. That room, where was it?" "An old house," Elvira said, her voice trembling. "Near the railway, not far from King's Cross. It smelled of mould, and the floors creaked. I was in a small room, with bars on the window. I climbed out when the guard fell asleep." Miss Marple's mind aligned the details. The house matched the canon's description, a hideout for Bess's operations. Elvira's escape was a miracle, but her knowledge made her a target. "You're very brave," she said, patting Elvira's hand. "But you must tell the police. Chief Inspector Davy is a good man, and he'll protect you. Your mother's plans are unravelling, and your truth can stop her." Elvira's eyes widened, her fear resurfacing. "But she'll know it was me. She always knows. And the others, her men, they're everywhere." Miss Marple's smile was firm, her resolve iron. "She's not omnipotent, my dear. In St. Mary Mead, a bully once terrorized a shopgirl, but her courage brought him down. You have that courage. I'll go with you to the inspector, and we'll keep you safe." Elvira hesitated, then nodded, her jaw set. "All right, but please stay with me. I'm so scared." "Of course," Miss Marple said, her tone as comforting as a quilt. She rose, helping Elvira to her feet, and led her to the lounge, where she hoped to find Davy. The room was busier now, with guests sipping morning coffee and staff moving with forced calm. Miss Marple's eyes scanned the scene, noting a porter who lingered near the reception desk, his ear cocked to a conversation between two waiters. The hotel, she thought, was a hive, its workers buzzing under Bess's command. But Elvira's confession had loosened a vital thread, and Miss Marple was determined to pull it. They found Chief Inspector Davy in a small office off the lobby, his desk cluttered with maps and telegrams, his broad face lit with surprise as Miss Marple entered, Elvira trailing behind. "Miss Marple," he said, rising, "and Miss Blake, this is unexpected. Everything all right?" "Not quite, Chief Inspector," Miss Marple said, closing the door. "Elvira has something to tell you. It's urgent, and I ask that you listen carefully." Davy's eyes sharpened, and he gestured to a chair. "Sit, Miss Blake. Whatever it is, you're safe here." Elvira sank into the chair, her hands trembling. Miss Marple stood beside her, a quiet pillar of strength. With halting words, Elvira repeated her story. Bess Sedgwick as her mother, the manipulation of her inheritance, the package of stolen goods, the canon's papers, and her imprisonment in the house near King's Cross. Davy listened, his pen scratching notes, his expression growing grimmer with each revelation. When Elvira finished, her voice a whisper, Davy leaned back, his chair creaking. "That's a hell of a story, Miss Blake. You're sure about all this? It's your mother we're talking about." Elvira nodded, her eyes wet but resolute. "I know, but it's true. I can't let her hurt anyone else. The canon me. It's too much." Davy glanced at Miss Marple, his admiration clear. "You've done wonders getting her to talk. This changes everything. We raided the vault last night based on your note. Found bonds, gold bars, even some of the robbery's cash. But the van was gone, slipped us at the docks. Your mother's a step ahead, but not for long." Miss Marple's lips pursed, her mind racing. "The house Elvira described. Have you searched near King's Cross?" "We're on it," Davy said. "Got men combing the area. Old properties, like you said. If it's a hideout, we'll find it. And Sedgwick, she's still here, bold as brass. Dining in her room last night, according to the staff. But I'm tightening the net." Miss Marple nodded, her thoughts aligning. Elvira's escape is a blow to her. Bess dismissed the canon's return, but she fears the girl's knowledge. Watch her closely, Chief Inspector. She may act rashly now. Davy scribbled a note, his jaw tight. "I've got eyes on her, and I'm posting a man with Miss Blake. No one's touching her. But that house, can you describe it again, Miss Blake? Any details?" Elvira swallowed, her voice steadier now. It was big, 3 stories, with peeling paint, a rusty gate, and a yard full of weeds. "The room I was in had a cracked ceiling, and I heard trains nearby, all night." Davy's pen flew across the page. "Good. That narrows it. We'll find it. And Miss Marple, that note you found, it's with forensics. The handwriting matches a sample we have from Sedgwick. It's not enough for a conviction, but it's a start." Miss Marple's eyes gleamed, though her face remained placid. "A start is all we need, Chief Inspector. In St. Mary Mead, a single letter led to a forger's downfall. Bess's confidence is her weakness. She believes she's untouchable. But Elvira's truth is a crack in her armour." Davy rose, his expression a mix of resolve and gratitude. "You're a marvel, both of you. Miss Blake, you're staying here under guard. Miss Marple, I'm doubling your protection. That vase wasn't a fluke. Someone's got it in for you." Miss Marple smiled faintly. "I've weathered worse, Chief Inspector. A St. Mary Mead poacher once tried to scare me with a dead rat. It only made me more curious." Davy chuckled, though his eyes were grim. "I don't doubt it. Stay sharp, both of you. We're close, but Sedgwick's dangerous when cornered." Miss Marple led Elvira back to the lounge, her arm linked with the girl's for reassurance. The room was bustling now, with guests unaware of the storm brewing beneath the hotel's surface. Miss Marple noted a waiter, the one with the scarred cheek, watching them from the bar. His gaze lingered too long, and she felt a chill. The staff, she realized, were Bess's sentinels, reporting every move. But Elvira's confession had shifted the balance, and Miss Marple sensed the endgame approaching. She settled Elvira in a quiet corner, ordering a fresh pot of tea. "Rest here, my dear," she said. "The inspector's men are near, and I'm just across the room. You've done a brave thing, and it will make all the difference." Elvira managed a weak smile, her hands steadier now. "Thank you, Miss Marple. I feel lighter somehow, like I can breathe again." Miss Marple patted her shoulder, her heart warm, but her mind vigilant. She returned to her own table, her knitting a pretext for observation. The lounge's chatter was a soft hum, but her eyes were on the staff. A porter polishing a brass railing, a maid adjusting a curtain. Their movements were too precise, their glances too calculated. The hotel, she thought, was a living machine, its parts oiled by Bess's will. But machines broke when strained, and Elvira's truth was a wrench in the gears. As noon approached, Miss Marple reflected on the morning's revelations. Elvira's confession had confirmed Bess as the mastermind, orchestrating the robbery and the cannon's abduction to secure her empire. The house near King's Cross, a mouldy relic, was her bolt hole, and the vault's loot, now partially seized, was her prize. But Bess's decision to lock Elvira away, rather than silence her, suggested a flicker of maternal instinct, a flaw Miss Marple could exploit. In St. Mary Mead, a mother's love had once led a thief to confess, her guilt outweighing her greed. Bess, for all her ruthlessness, might falter under similar pressure. Miss Marple's thoughts were interrupted by a soft tread. The waitress clearing cups leaned close, her voice a whisper. "Ma'am, there's a man asking for you. Outside by the garden gate. Says it's urgent." Miss Marple's eyes narrowed, her instincts flaring. "A man? Did he give a name?" "No, ma'am," the waitress said, her eyes darting nervously. "Tall, with a limp, looked rough." Miss Marple's heart sank. The scarred man from the Willow, Bess's courier. This was no coincidence. "Thank you, my dear," she said, her tone calm. "I'll see to it." She rose, her shawl draped over her shoulders, and slipped a note under her saucer. "Davy, man with scar, garden gate, urgent." She handed it to the waitress, instructing her to deliver it to the inspector's office. Instead of heading outside, Miss Marple made her way to the garden, but stayed within the hotel's glass doors, her view obscured by a hedge. The gate, rusted and half-hidden, was empty, but a shadow moved in the alley beyond. She waited, her breath steady, and saw him, the man with the scar, pacing, a cigarette glowing in his hand. His limp was pronounced, his face tense. He was alone, but his presence was a trap. She felt it in her bones. In St. Mary Mead, a lure had once drawn a curious boy to a poacher's snare. Miss Marple, wiser, would not take the bait. She retreated to the lounge, her mind alight with certainty. The men's summons was Bess's doing. A test or a threat. Elvira's confession had rattled her, and she was striking back. Miss Marple would alert Davy, keep Elvira close, and watch for Bess's next move. The hotel, with its glittering chandeliers and loyal staff, was a fortress, but fortresses fell when their secrets were laid bare. And Miss Marple, with her quiet tenacity, was the one to bear them. Chapter 10. The Syndicate Unravelled. The midday sun filtered through the tall windows of Bertram's hotel, bathing the lounge in a golden glow that belied the storm brewing within its walls. Miss Jane Marple, seated in her usual armchair, appeared, engrossed in her knitting, the soft click of her needles a steady counterpoint to the hum of conversation. Yet her eyes, sharp behind her spectacles, missed nothing. The waiter's hesitant steps, the porter's furtive glance, the undercurrent of unease that rippled through the staff. Elvira Blake's confession had cracked the hotel's polished façade, exposing Bess Sedgwick as the mastermind of a criminal syndicate. The train robbery, Canon Pennyfather's abduction, and the vault's stolen loot were threads in a tapestry Miss Marple was determined to unravel, and she sensed the climax was near. The lounge was a tableau of deceptive calm, with guests sipping tea and flipping through magazines, oblivious to the drama unfolding. Miss Marple, sipping her Darjeeling, reflected on the morning's events. Elvira's revelation that Bess was her mother, orchestrating the robbery and using her inheritance as leverage, had been a bombshell. The girl's escape from a mouldy house near King's Cross, coupled with the note Miss Marple found at the Willow, had spurred Chief Inspector Davy into action. His raid on the vault had yielded bonds and gold, but the van's escape to the docks showed Bess's cunning. The summons from the scarred man, a clear trap, had only deepened Miss Marple's resolve. In St. Mary Mead, a baited snare had once led her to a poacher's cache. Bertram's, she knew, held greater stakes. Her thoughts were interrupted by a stir at the entrance. Chief Inspector Davy entered, his broad frame taut with purpose. He carried a leather satchel, its edges worn, and his face was a map of determination and fatigue. Spotting Miss Marple, he made his way to her table, lowering himself into the chair opposite with a creak of leather. "Miss Marple," he said, keeping his voice low, "we're moving fast now, thanks to you and Miss Blake. I need your eyes on this." Miss Marple set her knitting aside, her expression placid but alert. "I'm all ears, Chief Inspector. What have you found?" Davy opened the satchel, producing a stack of papers bound with a rubber band. "We hit the basement again, after your tip about the vault. Found a hidden room behind it. False wall, just like the blueprints suggested. Stacked with crates, some empty, some not. Bonds, cash, even jewellery. All traceable to the robbery and other heists. But this," he tapped the papers, "this is the real prize. Ledgers, coded, listing transactions, names, dates. It's a syndicate, Miss Marple, and Bertram's is its heart." Miss Marple's eyes gleamed, though her voice remained mild. "A syndicate, you say? How extensive?" Davy leaned closer, his words a whisper. "Nationwide, maybe beyond. The ledgers show payments to couriers, fences, even police in other cities. Guest names, half are aliases, people who checked in to move goods or money. The staff, from porters to maids, are in on it, some willingly, some coerced. And at the top, clear as day, is B.S., Bess Sedgwick. She's been running this for years, using the hotel as a front." Miss Marple's needles rested in her lap, her mind racing. The scope was staggering, yet it fit the pattern she had glimpsed. The ghost guests, the cryptic ledgers, the staff's military precision. "And the Canon's notebook?" she asked. "Was it among the finds?" Davy nodded, pulling a small evidence bag from the satchel. Inside was the Canon's worn notebook, its pages creased. "Found it in the hidden room, tucked in a crate. The train schedules were marked, with notes on guard shifts, details only an insider could know. The Canon didn't realize what he had, but Bess did. His abduction was to get this, and to keep him quiet." Miss Marple's lips pursed, her thoughts aligning. And Elvira's role? Her inheritance? Davy's jaw tightened. The ledgers mention a trust fund, coded, but the dates match Elvira's 21st birthday. Bess was planning to siphon it, likely to bankroll the syndicate's expansion. Elvira was her pawn, coerced with threats and promises. The package she delivered, bonds, we think, was a test of her loyalty. Miss Marple nodded, her heart heavy for the girl. Poor child! And the house near King's Cross? Any trace of it? We found it, Davy said, his voice grim. Old, mansion, half derelict, just as Elvira described. Signs of recent use. Food scraps, cigarette butts, a room with bars on the window. No one there now, but we're combing it for prints. It's where they held the cannon. And Elvira, too. Bess's. Bolt hole close enough for quick trips. Miss Marple's eyes gleamed, a flicker of triumph. You're closing in, Chief Inspector. But Bess is bold. She'll know the vault's been breached. What's your next move? Davy's hand clenched the satchel. A full raid tonight. We've got enough to shut this place down. I'm bringing in every man I can spare. Basement, rooms, even the kitchens. We'll catch her red-handed with any luck. But I need you to keep Elvira safe. She's with my constable now, in a secure room, but she's fragile. And you, watch your back. That vase was no accident. Miss Marple's smile was serene, though her pulse quickened. I've dodged worse, Chief Inspector. In St. Mary Mead, a falling chimney pot once missed me by inches. It only sharpened my curiosity. Davy chuckled, his tension easing. You're a marvel, Miss Marple. I'll post another man outside your room. And if you spot anything at all, let me know. As Davy left, Miss Marple leaned back, her tea cooling. The lounge was busier now, with guests unaware of the net tightening around the hotel. She watched a porter, the wiry man with the scar above his brow, as he carried a tray of glasses, his eyes darting to the reception desk where Mr. Humphreys stood, sorting keys with a trembling hand. The staff, she thought, were machines, cogs, turning under Bess's command. But the machine was faltering, its parts strained by Elvira's betrayal and the cannon's return. She decided to review the ledgers herself, trusting Davy to share them. Rising, she made her way to the small office where he had set up, her umbrella tapping the floor. The constable at the door recognized her and let her pass. Inside, Davy was on the telephone, barking orders. He hung up as she entered, gesturing to the ledgers on the desk. Have a look, Miss Marple. Your eye for detail might catch something we missed. Miss Marple settled at the desk, her spectacles perched on her nose. The ledgers were meticulously kept, their pages filled with coded entries, dates, initials, sums in pounds and dollars. She traced a finger down a column, deciphering the shorthand. BS appeared repeatedly, linked to transactions labelled TR. Train robbery, she guessed. Other initials, JHMW, likely stood for Humphreys and the scarred courier. But one entry caught her eye. CP, schedules, acquired 10 through to 3. The date matched the cannon's disappearance, confirming his notebook's role. Another line, dated the previous night, read, Vault to D, 1 a.m., BS over C. The docks, she realized, were the destination, as the note had suggested. Her mind turned to the staff. The ledgers listed payments to P1, P2, W1, likely porters and waiters, their roles coded as transport or watch. The maids marked M1, M2 were paid less, tasked with clean duties, perhaps destroying evidence. The precision was chilling, a mirror of the hotel's service. In St. Mary Mead, A butcher's ledger had once hidden payments to poachers, his neat handwriting a façade for crime. Bertram's, she thought, was a grander deception, its elegance a mask for greed. She closed the ledger, her heart steady, but her thoughts urgent. The raid, if successful, would dismantle the syndicate, but Bess was a fox, likely to slip the trap. Miss Marple considered Elvira, now under guard, and wondered if the girl could offer more. Her confession had been a flood, but fear might still hold secrets back. Returning to the lounge, she found Elvira in a quiet corner, a constable nearby. The girl's face was pale but composed, her hands folded over a book. "May I sit, my dear?" Miss Marple asked, her smile gentle. Elvira nodded, and Miss Marple settled beside her, her shawl draped neatly. "You've been so brave," she said. "The inspector's raid tonight will end this thanks to you. But I wonder, did your mother ever mention a destination? Somewhere the goods might go after the docks?" Elvira's eyes flickered, a shadow of fear returning. "She didn't say much, but once, on the phone, I heard her mention the coast. She was angry, said something about a ship waiting. I didn't understand, but it sounded important." Miss Marple's heart quickened, though her face remained calm. "The coast," she murmured. "That's very helpful, my dear. You've done more than you know. Stay with the constable and don't worry. This will soon be over." Elvira managed a weak smile, her trust in Miss Marple a fragile light. Miss Marple rose, her mind alight with possibilities. The coast suggested a port, Dover perhaps, or Folkestone, where the loot could be smuggled abroad. She sought out Davy, finding him in the lobby, briefing a team of plainclothes officers. She drew him aside, her voice low. Elvira mentioned the coast, Chief Inspector. A ship, possibly, to move the goods. You might focus your men on Dover or nearby ports. Davy's eyes widened, a grin breaking through his fatigue. "You're a wonder, Miss Marple. I'll alert the Coast Guard and get men to the docks. If Sedgwick's planning a sea escape, we'll cut her off." Miss Marple nodded, her thoughts turning to Bess. The woman's boldness, staying at the hotel, charming guests while her syndicate crumbled, was a gambler's bravado. But gamblers, she knew, overplayed their hands. In St. Mary Mead, a card sharp had once boasted of his wins, only to be caught with marked decks. Bess, she suspected, was nearing her own reckoning. As evening fell, the hotel's atmosphere grew taut, like a bowstring drawn tight. Miss Marple, dining alone, noted the staff's strained movements. A waiter spilled a glass. A porter fumbled a key. Humphreys, at the reception desk, was absent, replaced by a nervous clerk. She overheard a guest complain about a delayed delivery, the clerk's apology too quick. The machine, she thought, was stalling, its parts misaligned by the raid's threat. She decided to probe one last time before the raid. Feigning a lost brooch, she approached the clerk, her manner disarming. "My dear, I must have dropped it near the service stairs. Could you check the lost and found ledger?" The clerk, flustered, opened a drawer, revealing a small notebook. As he flipped through it, Miss Marple's glance caught a page. "B.S. Urgent 22th, Orms 3 and 12. The time was an hour away, and the room, once empty, was now a focal point. She thanked the clerk, her heart racing, and slipped a note to the constable guarding Elvira. "Davy, BS in RM 312, 10 p.m. urgent." Returning to the lounge, Miss Marple watched the clock. At 9:30, Bess Sedgwick appeared, her crimson dress a stark contrast to the muted room. She moved with purpose, her eyes scanning the crowd, and headed for the lift. Miss Marple's pulse quickened. Room 312, she thought, was Bess's final stand. A meeting, perhaps, or a last attempt to move evidence. She considered following, but hesitated. Her role was to observe, not confront. Instead, she signalled the constable, who relayed her note to Davy's team. As 10 o'clock neared, the lounge grew quieter, guests retiring for the night. Miss Marple remained, her knitting a pretext for vigilance. A sudden commotion in the lobby broke the stillness. Shouts, footsteps, the crackle of radios. Davy's raid had begun. She rose, her shawl draped over her shoulders, and moved to a window overlooking the courtyard. Below, officers swarmed, their torches flashing as they entered the service entrance. A van, unmarked, was surrounded, its driver cuffed. The hotel's machine, she thought, was breaking apart. Davy emerged from the lobby, his face grim but triumphant. He spotted Miss Marple and approached, his voice low. "We've got her, Miss Marple. Room 312 was a gold mine. More bonds, a list of contacts, even a forged passport. Sedgwick was there, with Humphreys and that scarred man. Tried to bluff her way out, but the evidence was overwhelming." Miss Marple's eyes gleamed, a quiet satisfaction settling over her. "And Elvira?" "Safe," Davy said. "She's with my men giving a statement. Her testimony, your note, the ledgers, it's enough to bury Sedgwick and her crew. The syndicate's done." Miss Marple nodded, her heart light but her thoughts sober. "You've done splendidly, Chief Inspector. But Bess, she won't go quietly, will she?" Davy's jaw tightened. "No. She's laughing, even now, daring us to prove it all. But we will. The ledgers tie her to every move, and Elvira's story seals it." Miss Marple's lips twitched, a faint smile. "In St. Mary Mead, a thief once laughed as he was caught, thinking his charm would save him. It didn't. Bess will learn the same." Davy chuckled, his tension easing. "You're a force, Miss Marple. I'll need your statement, but for now, rest. You've earned it." Miss Marple returned to her chair, the lounge now empty, save for a lone maid, her face pale as she swept the floor. The hotel's grandeur, so perfect by day, was a hollow shell, its secrets laid bare. Bess's syndicate, with its ghost guests and coded ledgers, had crumbled, but the cost, Elvira's fear, the cannon's ordeal, lingered. Miss Marple, who had seen truth triumph in St. Mary Mead, knew justice was a quiet victory, won by patience and persistence. She would watch Bess's fall, protect Elvira, and leave Bertram's with its mask in tatters. Chapter 11. Bess's Gambit. The fog rolled in from the Thames, cloaking Bertram's hotel in a ghostly veil that muted its grandeur. Inside, the lounge retained its air of faded elegance, but the atmosphere was taut, as if the chandeliers themselves held their breath. Miss Jane Marple, seated by a window with her knitting bag at her side, sipped her tea with apparent calm, yet her senses were as sharp as the needles in her hands. The raid on the hotel's hidden rooms had exposed Bess Sedgwick's syndicate, Unmasking Bertram's, as a hub of crime. Bonds, gold, and coded ledgers had been seized, and Elvira Blake's testimony had pinned Bess as the mastermind. Yet Miss Marple, who had seen many a drama unfold in St. Mary Mead, knew the final act was yet to play out. Bess, with her daring and guile, would not surrender quietly. The lounge was sparsely populated, its usual bustle dampened by the previous night's upheaval. A few guests lingered, their whispers laced with curiosity about the police presence, while the staff moved with a strained precision, their loyalty to Bess tested by the raid's fallout. Miss Marple's eyes, half hidden behind her spectacles, noted the signs. A waiter's hesitant glance towards the reception desk. A maid's fumbled tray, the absence of Mr. Humphreys, who had been taken for questioning. The hotel, she thought, was a wounded beast, its mechanisms faltering under the weight of exposure. Yet Bess remained, a defiant shadow, and Miss Marple sensed a desperate move brewing. Her thoughts turned to Chief Inspector Davies' report that morning. The raid had been a triumph, yielding a trove of evidence, stolen goods, forged documents, and a list of syndicate operatives spanning London to Liverpool. Bess had been caught in room 312, her crimson dress a stark contrast to the drab crates around her, laughing as she dared Davy to prove her guilt. The ledgers, with their meticulous entries, tied her to the train robbery and beyond, while Elvira's account of coercion sealed her fate. Yet the van that had slipped away to the docks hinted at a contingency plan, and Bess's composure suggested she still held cards. In St. Mary Mead, a cornered poacher had once escaped by setting his barn ablaze, leaving only ashes for the law. Miss Marple feared Bess might attempt a similar gambit. She set her tea down, her mind sifting details. Elvira, now under police protection in a discreet suite, was safe but shaken, her courage a fragile flame. The canon, recovering in his room, remained a puzzle. His muddled memories of a creaky house and a sharp-voiced woman offered clues, but no clarity. The house near King's Cross, searched and found empty, was a dead end, its secrets carried away by Bess's men. Yet the note Miss Marple had found at the Willow, vault clear by 1 a.m., van to docks, E secured, lingered in her thoughts. The docks, she suspected, were Bess's escape route, and E secured might mean more than Elvira's brief captivity. In St. Mary Mead, a cryptic note had once led her to a hidden cache. Here, it pointed to Bess's endgame. Her reverie was broken by a soft tread. A constable, young and earnest, approached, his helmet tucked under his arm. "Miss Marple," he said, keeping his voice low. "Inspector Davies' compliments. He'd like a word in the manager's office. Says it's urgent." Miss Marple nodded, gathering her shawl and knitting bag. "Thank you, my dear. Lead the way." She followed the constable through the lobby, noting the empty reception desk and the faint echo of footsteps from the upper floors. The hotel, once a hive of activity, felt hollow, its grandeur a mask for chaos. In the manager's office, Davy stood by a cluttered desk, his broad frame silhouetted against a window. Papers and telegrams spilled across the surface, and a map of London's docks was pinned to the wall, marked with red ink. His face, etched with exhaustion, lit with relief as Miss Marple entered. "Miss Marple," he said, gesturing to a chair, You're a sight for sore eyes. We've got a problem, and I need your brain." Miss Marple settled into the chair, her umbrella resting against her knee. "A problem, Chief Inspector? I trust it's not a lack of evidence." Davy's lips twitched. A fleeting smile. "No, we've got that in spades. The ledgers, Elvira's statement, the vault's haul. It's enough to lock Sedgwick away for years. But she slipped us. Vanished sometime after midnight. My men were watching her room, the exits, everything. She's gone, and I've got a bad feeling she's not done." Miss Marple's heart sank, though her face remained placid. Vanished. How extraordinary! Were there no signs? Davy ran a hand through his hair, his frustration palpable. None. Her room's empty, clothes, jewellery, all gone. A window was open, but it's a sheer drop, 3 stories. We found a rope, though, tied to a radiator. She's bold, I'll give her that. And a car's missing from the hotel garage. A black saloon, fast. My men are scouring the city, but she's got a head start. Miss Marple's needles, tucked in her bag, seemed to itch for action, though she kept her hands still. "A rope and a stolen car," she murmured. "She's playing for high stakes. The docks, perhaps. The note mentioned a van heading there, and Elvira spoke of the coast." Davy nodded, tapping the map. "Exactly. We've got the docks locked down, every port from Tilbury to Dover. The Coast Guard's on alert, and we're checking ships for forged manifests. But Sedgwick's clever. She might have another hideout, or a contact we haven't traced. That's where you come in. You've got a knack for seeing what's hidden. Any ideas?" Miss Marple's eyes gleamed, her mind sifting possibilities. "The house near King's Cross," she said. "It's empty now, but it was her bolt hole. She may have another, perhaps closer to the docks. Look for properties tied to the syndicate's shell companies, warehouses, old inns, anything discreet, and her men, the scarred courier, for instance. He's still at large." Davy's jaw tightened. "Aye, he slipped us too. We're tracking him, but he's a ghost." Elvira's description helped. Scar, limp, sharp features. If he's with Sedgwick, he's her muscle. Miss Marple nodded, her thoughts turning to Bess's psychology. "She's desperate, Chief Inspector, but not reckless. Her escape was planned, likely before the raid. The rope, the car, they were ready. She's heading somewhere she feels safe, where she can regroup. But she'll need money. And the vault's loss limits her options. Check her past. Old lovers, business partners. She may turn to them." Davy scribbled a note, his admiration clear. "You're a step ahead, as always. I've got men digging into her history, every husband, every scandal. And we're watching Elvira, in case Sedgwick tries to reach her. The girl's shaken, but holding up." Miss Marple's lips pursed, a flicker of concern. "Elvira's safety is paramount. Bess may see her as a loose end, despite their bond. In St. Mary Mead, a mother once betrayed her son to save herself. Bess's love for Elvira is real, but her survival comes first." Davy leaned back, his chair creaking. "You're painting a picture, Miss Marple. Sedgwick as a cornered fox, cunning but trapped. I'll follow your leads. Docks, hideouts, her past. But if you spot anything here, anything odd, let me know. The staff are rattled, and they might let something slip." Miss Marple smiled faintly. "I always watch, Chief Inspector. The hotel's pulse is weak, but it still beats. Bess's absence hasn't broken it." Davy rose, his satchel in hand. "Stay safe, Miss Marple. That vase was a warning. and Sedgwick's not above worse. I've doubled your guard, but keep your eyes open. I've faced worse in St. Mary Mead, she said, her tone light but firm. A thief once left a snake in my garden shed. It only made me more determined. Davy chuckled, his tension easing. You're a force, Miss Marple. I'll be in touch. He left, his footsteps echoing in the corridor, and Miss Marple returned to the lounge, her mind alight with urgency. The hotel's grandeur, once a shield, was now a liability, its staff and secrets exposed. Bess's escape was a bold stroke, but it betrayed her desperation. Miss Marple, who had tracked a fugitive gardener through St. Mary Mead's hedgerows, knew the hunted always left tracks. She settled into her armchair, her tea replenished by a nervous maid. The lounge was quieter, now, with only a few guests lingering. A retired admiral reading a naval journal, a young woman sketching in a notebook. Miss Marple's eyes scanned the staff. A porter polishing a brass railing, his hands unsteady. A waiter clearing cups, his gaze fixed on the floor. The machine, she thought, was grinding to a halt, its parts misaligned by Bess's absence. Yet someone, she suspected, knew her plans. A loyal lieutenant, perhaps, or a coerced servant. Her chance came when the maid, a girl with a pinched face, approached to adjust the curtains. Miss Marple, seizing the moment, smiled warmly. "My dear, you look tired. It must be dreadful with all this commotion. Do they know where Lady Sedgwick's gone?" The maid started, her cloth pausing on the window pane. I don't know, ma'am. No one's saying anything. She was here last night, then. Gone. The staff are scared. She was the one who kept things running. Miss Marple's tone was gentle, coaxing. Of course, she was so commanding. I imagine she left instructions, though. Someone must know her plans. Mr. Humphreys, perhaps. The maid's eyes darted to the reception desk, now manned by a clerk. Mr. Humphreys is with the police, ma'am. But I heard him before he left. He was on the phone, whispering about a safe house by the river. Said it was her orders, in case things went wrong. Miss Marple's heart quickened, though her face showed only concern. How curious. By the river, you say? Well, I'm sure the police will sort it out. Thank you, my dear. The maid scurried off, and Miss Marple leaned back, her thoughts racing. A safe house by the river, likely near the docks, fit Bess's pattern of staying close to her escape route. In St. Mary Mead, a smuggler had used a riverside cottage to store contraband. Bess, with her syndicate's resources, would choose something similar. She resolved to share the maid's tip with Davy, but first decided to observe the staff further, hoping for another slip. Rising, she strolled to the reception desk, feigning a query about her bill. The clerk, a young man with a nervous tic, assured her all was in order, his hands fumbling with a ledger. Miss Marple's glance caught a note tucked beneath a blotter. River, 2 a.m. B.S. The time, hours away, suggested a rendezvous, and the initials confirmed Bess's hand. She thanked the clerk, her pulse racing, and returned to her chair, memorizing the note's details. The lounge was nearly empty now, save for a waiter wiping tables. Miss Marple watched him, noting his quick glances towards the service door. He was the one with the scarred cheek, who had passed Elvira a note days earlier. His presence, she thought, was no coincidence. Bess's loyalists were still active, covering her tracks. She considered confronting him, but hesitated. A direct approach risked alerting the syndicate's remnants. Instead, she slipped a note under her saucer. "Davy, River Safe House, 2 a.m., BS check staff, ESP Shascard waiter," and signalled the constable guarding Elvira to deliver it. As dusk settled, the fog thickened, shrouding the hotel in a spectral haze. Miss Marple dined alone, her consommé and poached fish a pretext for observation. The dining room was subdued, with guests whispering about the scandal, and staff moving like automatons. She overheard a porter mutter about the river. "Job?" His voice cut off by a sharp glance from a colleague. The phrase, innocuous to others, was a beacon to Miss Marple. The river, she realised, was Bess's final stage, where her gambit would play out. She retired to her room, intending to rest before the night's events, but a soft knock startled her. The constable, his face tense, stood at her door. "Ma'am, the inspector's orders. We've got a lead on Sedgwick, a warehouse by the Thames, tied to one of her shell companies. He's mobilising now, but he wants you and Miss Blake moved to a safe location. Car's waiting." Miss Marple's heart sank, but her resolve held. "Very well, my dear. Let me fetch my coat." She donned a dark cloak, tucking her knitting bag under her arm, and followed the constable to Elvira's suite. The girl, pale but composed, clutched a shawl, her eyes wide with fear. "Miss Marple?" she whispered. "Is it over?" "Soon, my dear," Miss Marple said, her tone steady. "The inspector's closing in. Stay close, and we'll be fine." They descended to the lobby, where a police car idled in the fog. As they crossed the courtyard, a shadow moved. A man, lean and limping, emerging from the mist. The scarred courier, his face twisted with urgency, raised a hand, but the constable shouted, drawing his truncheon. The man bolted, vanishing into the fog, and Miss Marple's pulse raced. His presence confirmed her fears. Bess's network was active, and the river was their goal. The car sped through London's fog-choked streets, its headlights slicing the gloom. Miss Marple, seated beside Elvira, murmured reassurances, but her mind was on the warehouse. Davy's raid, if timed right, could catch Bess mid-flight, but her rope escape showed her resourcefulness. In St. Mary Mead, a fugitive had once slipped a posse by hiding in a hayloft. Bess, with her syndicate's reach, would be harder to pin. They reached a police safe house, a nondescript flat in Bloomsbury, where armed officers stood guard. Miss Marple settled Elvira with a cup of tea, her own thoughts restless. A radio crackled with updates. Davy's team had surrounded the warehouse, a derelict structure by Wapping Docks. At 1:45 a.m, shots rang out, followed by shouts. Miss Marple, listening from the flat, gripped her shawl, her heart with the inspector. At 2:10 the radio buzzed. "Sedgwick apprehended. Suspect in custody. Warehouse secured." Miss Marple exhaled, a quiet relief settling over her. She turned to Elvira, whose eyes were fixed on the radio. "It's done, my dear," she said. "Your mother's caught. You're free." Elvira's tears came, a mix of relief and grief. I didn't want this, but she wouldn't stop. "Thank you, Miss Marple." Miss Marple patted her hand, her heart warm but sober. The constable relayed Davy's report. Bess, cornered in the warehouse with the scarred courier and a crate of bonds, had fought briefly before surrendering. In custody, she admitted masterminding the syndicate, using Bertram's as a front for thefts, forgeries and cover-ups. Elvira's inheritance, she confessed, was her final target, a fund to rebuild her empire abroad. But Miss Marple's persistence, her notes, her talks with Elvira, her vigilance, had thwarted her. Bess's laughter, Davy said, had faded as the cuffs closed. Miss Marple leaned back, the flat, dim light softening her features. The hotel's mask was off, its syndicate shattered. Bess's gambit, bold and desperate, had failed, undone by a spinster's quiet tenacity. In St. Mary Mead, a thief's escape had once been foiled by a single footprint. Here, it was a note, a confession, and a maid's whispered clue. Miss Marple, who knew the power of small things, felt the weight of victory, tempered by the cost. She would return to Bertram's, ensure Elvira's safety, and leave the hotel to its reckoning, its grandeur forever tarnished by truth. Chapter 12. The hotel closes. The morning sun pierced the fog that had shrouded Bertram's hotel, casting a pale light over its ornate façade. Inside, the grand lobby, once a beacon of Edwardian splendour, felt hollow, its polished marble and gleaming, chandeliers unable to mask the tarnish of scandal. Miss Jane Marple, seated in a velvet armchair near the reception desk, folded her knitting with deliberate care, her black shawl draped over her shoulders. The hotel's closure, announced in the papers with headlines of crime syndicate exposed, had emptied its halls of guests and stripped its staff of their practised deference. Yet Miss Marple, whose quiet vigilance had unravelled Bess Sedgwick's web, lingered, her thoughts on the aftermath. In St. Mary Mead, a village scandal had once left a shop shuttered, its secrets laid bare. Bertram's, she knew, faced a similar fate, but its echoes would resonate far beyond London's squares. The lobby was nearly deserted, save for a few porters stacking luggage and a clerk sorting papers with a defeated air. The air carried a faint scent of dust, as if the hotel's vitality had drained away overnight. Miss Marple's eyes, sharp behind her spectacles, noted the details. A cracked vase on a side table, a curtain sagging from its rod, a porter's uniform unbuttoned at the collar. The machine that had sustained Bess's syndicate, its ghost guests' coded ledgers and complicit staff, had ground to a halt, its parts scattered by Chief Inspector Davy's raid and Bess's capture. Yet Miss Marple, who had seen human nature's complexities in St. Mary Mead, felt no triumph, only a quiet resolve to tie the final threads. Her thoughts turned to the previous night's climax. Bess Sedgwick, cornered in a Thames-side warehouse, had surrendered with a defiant laugh, her crimson dress a stark contrast to the fog's gloom. In custody, she had confessed to orchestrating the train robbery, Canon Pennyfather's abduction, and a network of thefts funneled through Bertram's. Elvira Blake's inheritance, a fortune meant to fuel her empire, had been her ultimate prize. But Elvira's courage and Miss Marple's persistence had thwarted her. The ledgers, seized from the vault, mapped a syndicate that stretched from London's docks to northern ports, its operatives now hunted by Davy's men. Bess's gambit, her daring escape with a rope and stolen car, had failed, undone by a maid's whispered clue and a spinster's keen eye. Miss Marple sipped her tea, brought by a nervous maid who avoided her gaze. The girl, like many staff, faced questioning, their roles in the syndicate ranging from coerced to complicit. Mr. Humphreys, the manager, was in custody, his polished demeanour cracked by evidence of his coded orders. The scarred courier, Bess's trusted lieutenant, had been caught fleeing the warehouse, his limp betraying him in the fog. Elvira, now free from her mother's shadow, was preparing to leave London, her inheritance secured, but her heart heavy. Canon Pennyfather, blissfully vague, was back in his room, scribbling notes for a sermon, unaware of the storm he had sparked. Miss Marple, reflecting on their fates, saw the human tapestry beneath the crime. Fear, loyalty, greed, and redemption, woven as tightly as her knitting. Her reverie was broken by the heavy tread of Chief Inspector Davy, his broad frame filling the lobby's entrance. He carried a battered briefcase, its contents spilling with papers, and his face was a map of exhaustion and quiet triumph. Spotting Miss Marple, he crossed to her, sinking into the chair opposite with a sigh that spoke of sleepless nights. "Miss Marple," he said, his voice warm but weary, "you're still here holding court. I owe you a debt I can't repay." Miss Marple's lips twitched, a faint smile. "Nonsense, Chief Inspector. I only watched and listened, as I do in St. Mary Mead. You and your men did the heavy lifting. How fares the case?" Davy opened his briefcase, pulling out a notebook. "Airtight, thanks to you. Sedgwick's confession is the crown jewel. She's admitted to everything. The robbery, the Canon's kidnapping, the syndicate's operations. The ledgers fill in the gaps, names, dates, shipments. We've rounded up a dozen of her operatives, from porters to fences, and more are in our sights. The hotel's trust, that murky web of owners, is under scrutiny. Shell companies, foreign accounts. We're peeling it back, layer by layer." Miss Marple nodded, her eyes gleaming with quiet satisfaction. "And Elvira, she's borne a great deal." Davy's expression softened. "She's holding up, poor lass. She's with a cousin in Kent, away from the press." Her statement was gold, detailed, unflinching. Sedgwick used her like a pawn, promising a mother's love while eyeing her millions. Elvira's free now, but it'll take time to heal. She asked me to thank you, by the way. Says you gave her courage." Miss Marple's heart warmed, though her face remained placid. "She had it all along, Chief Inspector. In St. Mary Mead, a girl once stood up to a bullying uncle, her fear turning to strength. Elvira's no different. And the Canon?" Davy chuckled, a rare lightness breaking through. Back to his old self, muttering about theology and train times. He's no idea he was the key to it all. Those schedules in his notebook were the robbery's blueprint. He's heading to a quiet vicarage, where he'll do no harm. I've got a man keeping an eye, just in case." Miss Marple's needles, tucked in her bag, seemed to beckon, but she kept her hands still. "And Bess Sedgwick? Her spirit won't break easily." Davy's jaw tightened, his voice grim. "No, it won't. She's in a cell, still sharp as a blade. Laughed when we read the charges, said we'd never hold her. But the evidence is ironclad. Ledgers, bonds, Elvira's testimony, even her own words. She's facing years, maybe life. Her charm won't sway a judge." Miss Marple nodded, her thoughts on Bess's duality. A woman of brilliance and ruthlessness, undone by her own ambition. She was a force, Chief Inspector. In St. Mary Mead, a charismatic forger once swayed half the village, but his lies caught up with him. Bess's empire, grand as it was, followed the same path. Davy leaned back, his chair creaking. You've a way of seeing the heart of things, Miss Marple. This case, it's the biggest of my career, and you were the spark. That note from the willow, your talks with Elvira, spotting that maid's tip about the river, it all led us to Sedgwick. How do you do it?" Miss Marple's smile was serene, her eyes twinkling. "I only observe, Chief Inspector. People are much the same, whether in a village or a hotel. Their flaws, their hopes, they show through if you look. St. Mary Mead taught me that, and Bertram's proved it." Davy shook his head, a mix of awe and amusement. "You're a marvel. I'll need your statement for the record, but take your time. The hotel's closing tomorrow. Owner's orders once the press got wind. It'll be auctioned or turned into flats. Shame in a way, but it's tainted now." Miss Marple's lips pursed, a flicker of sadness. "Yes, a shame. It was a beautiful place once. But beauty can hide rot, as I've learned. What of the staff?" "Most are being questioned," Davy said. "Some were coerced, maids, younger porters, promised money or threatened. Others, like Humphreys, were deep in it, taking a cut. We're sorting them out, case by case. The scarred man, Sedgwick's courier, is singing like a bird, hoping for a deal. He's named names, places, helped us trace that van to a ship in Dover. We stopped it just in time." Miss Marple's eyes gleamed, a quiet triumph. "You've done splendidly, Chief Inspector. The syndicate's roots run deep, but you've cut them. I trust you'll keep an eye on Elvira. She'll need guidance." "Already arranged," Davy said. "She's got a solicitor, and I've a friend in Kent who'll check on her. She's young, but tough. She'll find her way." Miss Marple nodded, her heart eased. She rose, her shawl draped neatly, and Davy escorted her to the lobby, where a porter was stacking chairs. "I'll send a car for you tomorrow," he said. "Back to St. Mary Mead, I presume." "Yes," Miss Marple said, her voice soft. "My garden needs tending, and my niece will want the tail. But I'll miss Bertram's in a way. It was instructive." Davy chuckled, tipping his hat. "Safe travels, Miss Marple, and if I'm ever in St. Mary Mead, I'll look you up. Might need your eye for my next case." She smiled, her eyes twinkling. "You're always welcome, Chief Inspector. Bring a puzzle, and we'll solve it over tea." He left, his briefcase swinging, and Miss Marple lingered, her gaze sweeping the lobby. The chandeliers, once radiant, seemed dim, their light unable to dispel the shadows of crime. The hotel's closure, she thought, was a cleansing, like a village purging a corrupt official. She decided to visit Elvira before departing, hoping to offer a final word of comfort. The girl's suite, guarded by a constable, was a haven of quiet amid the hotel's decay. Elvira, dressed in a simple coat, was packing a small case, her movements deliberate, but her face still pale. She brightened at Miss Marple's knock, ushering her in with a shy smile. "Miss Marple," she said, "I was hoping to see you. I don't know how to thank you." Miss Marple settled into a chair, her umbrella resting against her knee. "No thanks needed, my dear. You were brave, and that's enough. How are you faring?" Elvira's eyes glistened, but her voice was steady. "Better, I think. The police have been kind, and my cousin's waiting in Kent. I'll start over, away from all this. But my mother, I can't stop thinking about her. She was so strong, so alive. Why did she do it?" Miss Marple's tone was gentle, her words chosen with care. "Some people, my dear, are driven by a hunger no wealth can sate. Your mother's brilliance was her gift, but it became her curse. She built an empire, but empires fall. In St. Mary Mead, a man once stole to feed his pride, not his family. Your mother's pride was her downfall, but you are not her. You've chosen truth. Elvira's tears fell, but she wiped them away. Her jaw set. I want to be different. I'll use the money, my inheritance, for good. Schools, maybe, or hospitals. Something she'd never understand. Miss Marple's heart warmed, her smile radiant. That's a fine plan, my dear. You'll find your way, and you'll do it with grace. If you're ever near St. Mary Mead, come for tea. My roses are quite lovely in spring. Elvira managed a laugh, a spark of hope in her eyes. I will. Thank you, Miss Marple, for everything. They embraced, a brief but heartfelt moment, and Miss Marple left, her steps light despite the hotel's gloom. Her final task was to bid farewell to Canon Pennyfather, whose room was a clutter of books and papers. He greeted her with a vague smile, his glasses perched crookedly on his nose. Miss Marple, he exclaimed, waving a pen. Such a fuss, all this. I'm told I was kidnapped, but it's all a blur. I'm off to a vicarage tomorrow to finish my sermon. Care to hear it? Miss Marple chuckled, her eyes twinkling. Another time, Canon. I'm glad you're safe. Do take care with your notebooks. They're more valuable than you know. He blinked, puzzled, but nodded. Oh, yes, quite. Safe travels, my dear. She left, amused by his innocence, a contrast to the hotel's darkness. In St. Mary Mead, a bumbling vicar had once stumbled into a theft, his naivety a shield. The canon, she thought, was cut from the same cloth. As evening fell, Miss Marple packed her modest suitcase, her woolens and mittens neatly folded. The hotel's closure was official, its doors to lock at midnight. She strolled the corridors one last time, her umbrella tapping the carpet. Room 312, once a hub of secrets, was sealed, its door marked by police tape. The basement, now stripped of crates, was a cavern of echoes. The staff, those not arrested, drifted like ghosts, their futures uncertain. Miss Marple, who had seen a village recover from scandal, knew Bertram's would fade, its name a cautionary tale. At the station, a train waited, its steam curling into the dusk. Miss Marple boarded, her compartment cosy and quiet, a world away from the hotel's chaos. As the train pulled away, she gazed at London's receding lights, her thoughts on human nature. Bess's syndicate, with its cunning and greed, was a mirror of flaws she had seen everywhere. In St. Mary Mead's cottages, in Bertram's parlours. Yet Elvira's courage, Davy's dogged pursuit, and her own quiet watchfulness showed the other side. Resilience, justice, truth. The hotel, she mused, had been a stage, its crimes a grand performance. But the curtain had fallen, and the players faced their reckoning. Miss Marple opened her book, a slim volume of Austen, but her mind lingered on Bertram's lessons. Evil, she knew, wore many masks, but a keen eye could pierce them. Her village, with its gossip and gardens, had honed her gift, and London had tested it. As the train rumbled towards St. Mary Mead, she smiled, her heart light with the promise of home, where roses bloomed and secrets, though smaller, always whispered to those who listened.